Chapter 341. Takeout. Michael squeezed through two elephant folks just to get through to the kitchen area. Walking inside, he saw Tony, Remy, and the rest of the chefs sweating profusely as they worked tirelessly in cooking more chickens. Michael felt bad for the little kid as he plucked out the feathers on a frozen chicken. They were so busy that they didn't even have time to greet Michael. "Sorry, Michael. We're way behind schedule," Tony replied. "Some of our customers have already been waiting for a whole candle." "Sorry, a whole hour." The restaurant was already equipped with a mechanical clock, which made timekeeping much more accurate, but seemed to only exacerbate the time pressure even more. "Why are there so many people waiting inside? Didn't you prepare enough chicken for them?" "We did, boss," one of the Rebornian chefs replied. "But they don't have a place to sit in. Most of them are even eating on the floor. Even when people received their order after 30 or more minutes, they would have to wait even longer as they looked for a table to sit in. This only worsened the congestion inside the restaurant. Some of them even resorted to eating on the floor or eating standing up, which wasn't a very pleasant experience. Michael didn't anticipate this problem. He designed restaurants like the fast food establishments in his previous life, where the occupancy was only 100 or less people inside. He thought he'd be able to solve the problem before things got too out of hand. Unfortunately, the problem of the Golden Road, the bastard bandits, and even the Fairies occupied him for far too long that he was completely unable to help the restaurant to become a true fast food establishment. For now, though, Michael decided to help Tony and the chefs by offering his magic to them. Suddenly, 30-plus chickens levitated out of the chicken and floated in the air. 1,000 invisible hands made out of pure mana plucked out all the feathers from its skin before slathering them in a mixture of Tony's special flavoring. And with a simple fire spell, Michael burned the chickens at an extremely hot temperature enough to melt even metal for a moment, cooking it to perfection in just a few seconds. Tony, Remy, and the other chefs stared in awe at Michael's amazing display of precise magic. A simple wrong input of fire mana or immersing it a few milliseconds later would have burned the chickens into char. But somehow, Michael was able to cook the chickens to perfection without a single bit of burned chicken skin. Whoa! Clap! 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 Finally, our chickens! Woo! Even customers waiting outside the counter cheered as they saw the fully cooked McTony's chicken get levitated into the counter for everyone to take. And once all of that was over, he went outside and created temporary tables and chairs made out of granite on the ground. He personally escorted all the standing customers to their own tables, solving the congestion inside the restaurant. A few hours later, the rush of customers had finally come to an end. Tony and the other chefs found some breathing room and collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath as they overcame yet another hard day at work. "HHA, it would be helpful if you can do that every day," Tony said, half joking and half serious. Michael understood that the congestion of people inside the restaurant was a problem that would eventually come and bite them in the ass. The point of the restaurant was to give everyone a pleasant experience of eating while on the road. But having to stand around in a place full of people was the exact opposite of that. "I should have implemented the takeout section of the restaurant," Michael muttered to himself. He was about to do it before, but he was rudely interrupted by the bandits who ambushed the restaurant. After that, he was so caught up with his business in the East Forest that he was unable to bring it up with Tony again. But now that he had some time, he could finally teach it to Tony and the rest of the chefs. "I know how to solve your problem," he said to Tony. "How?" "Just cook more chicken early in the day." "But where will the customers eat?" Michael smiled. "Wherever they want to. On the road, while walking, while on their carriages. Anywhere." "What? How will that even be possible?" Michael raised his hand, creating a magic circle that rotated around his wrist, which summoned a projection of a malleable piece of paper made out of nothing but light mana. This projection floated in the air, waiting for Michael's instructions. Downloading folding instructions for a takeout box. Suddenly, his head was filled with knowledge from his previous world, allowing him to skillfully fold and manipulate the light mana paper into a small box that was reminiscent of all the takeout boxes Michael had ordered in another lifetime. "What's that?" Tony asked as he looked at the light box floating above Michael's palm. This is a takeout box, Michael explained. This is where we'll put the chicken and serve it to our customers. How? To answer his question, Michael opened the box to reveal that it was actually made out of two connected open boxes. The left half of the box contained a projection of McTony's chicken, and on the other half was kitchen utensils, a fork and a knife, made out of a very thin wood material. Whoa! Remy muttered out. His eyes gleamed as he was the first one to realize the potential of this takeout box. This takeout box is not just a container, but it's also a plate as well. As long as they have this, then they can eat anywhere they want. They can take it back home, they can eat it on the road, or they can even eat it on the side of the road. They don't have to wait inside the restaurant. They can take it anywhere and whenever they want. Tony's eyes grew larger as he looked at the takeout box. He was starting to realize how Michael was able to create such a successful company at such a young age. His ideas were truly innovative. That's amazing, Michael, Tony praised. As incredible as always, boss. The other Rebornian chefs applauded. Hey, Mr. Michael, how are we going to create this takeout box? Remy asked. How do you fold it again? The little boy was extremely curious about the takeout box and immediately wanted to construct one himself. However, the answer to his question gave Michael another headache. I'll hire more workers to learn how to fold the boxes, and they'll be the one in charge of all the takeout orders. You all just focus on cooking chicken. You guys don't have to worry about anything. Even though he said that he was the one who was worrying the most. After all, in order to create those takeout boxes, he had to create another factory and assembly line to create enough products to keep up with the supply. However, creating another factory would need more materials to construct. Just when he thought he was about to solve his resource problem, another problem suddenly reared its head. Chapter 342. Takeout boxes. Michael consoled himself with the fact that it would take a long time before he needed a factory to produce takeout boxes. At least for now, he could make do with handmade boxes that he or others could make through magic. ChatJK4, please tell me the process and ingredients in how to make takeout boxes. Sure, Michael. Takeout boxes are made out of a material called paperboard and can be made through. His trusted personal AI assistant quickly gave Michael all the information he needed to create his own takeout boxes from scratch. The main ingredient he would need for this was wood. So he quickly transported himself to Angora City in search of Barkus. The man used to own a whole forest for himself, so he would definitely know where the best wood was located. Sure, Michael. We have many varieties of woods in our territory, Barkus said, pointing to a map on the table. If you want softwood, then it can be found around here just right over this mountain. But if you want hardwood, then we have plenty of it on the outskirts of the grafted cluster too. To create a paperboard, Michael needed softwood. So, he quickly followed Barkus' directions and found himself right in the midst of all these trees ready for harvest. He approached a spruce tree and touched its bark. I'll replant more trees later. But for now, I'll need your services. Michael's hands glowed as a magic circle appeared hovering in front of his palms. Suddenly, the tree started to shake and stir, before a force uprooted it from the ground. Hovering a few inches off the air, all its leaves and the soil around its roots started to fall off, leaving only its wood. Then, an invisible force squished the bald tree into a thin layer, destroying its bark. Then, another force from the top and the bottom squished the tree even more, splintering the tree into fibers. These squishing forces made out of pure earth mana continued to batter the tree until it was only pulp. This was the first process of creating a paperboard. Thankfully, ChatJK4 was able to create a customized 4-star spell in order to simplify the procedure within just a few minutes. Next, this pulp was cleaned and purified of any impurities like soil and sap from the tree. ChatJK4 identified the unique mana signatures and ratios of all these chemicals in the pulp and created a spell to completely disintegrate it from existence. The ball of pulp in the air started to glow and heat up, with all the impurities turning into smoke and leaving the pulp ready to be ironed into a thin sheet. Thinning it out was easy, creating many layers of thin paper-like sheets from the pulp. Then, for the third step, Michael commanded all of the water mana present in the sheets to remove themselves from the mixture. And as the water drains, the fibers in the pulps form a very strong bond, creating a solid piece of sheet. Now, it just needs a little bit of clay for a coating layer, and Michael was able to create the world's first durable paperboard. It was much thicker than paper and can withstand great forces without costing too much to produce. It was the perfect material for a takeout box. A magic circle appeared in his hands as he drew the unfolded layout of a takeout box onto the paper sheets. And suddenly, the shape was cut out from the rest of the paperboard, creating multiple takeout boxes ready to be folded and used. He spent the rest of the day creating more cutouts for the takeout boxes, which would be enough for at least a week of service for the McTony's restaurant. Satisfied with his work, Michael used his shadow and transported him and the rest of the cutouts back to the truck stop. Tony almost threw the hot chicken pan into the wall when the piles and piles of takeout boxes fell from the ceiling above. "That surprised me," Tony muttered, putting the chicken back down on the table. He turned to Michael, who appeared right after the piles of sheets appeared on the kitchen floor. "Is this?" Michael smiled and took out one of the boxes. With a simple turn of his hand, the flat sheet of thick paper folded itself to become a rectangular box that opened like a clam. "Yes, this is the takeout box," Michael explained. "This is where you'll serve the chicken to the customers." A cooked McTony's chicken floated out of the stove and into the takeout box, completing the look. There was even a disposable wooden fork and knife included in the takeout box, allowing people to eat on the go whenever and wherever they wanted. "Cool," Remy muttered. He took one of the flat sheets and started fiddling with it, trying to copy Michael's folding movements. "I'll hire people to become your servers. They'll be the ones to fold the takeout boxes and prepare the food for the customers. What do you think?" Michael asked. This is even better than I expected," Tony exclaimed. On the next day of service around midday, the truck stop's parking space was filled with customers waiting in line inside McTony's restaurant. One returning customer brought along with him a friend who hadn't tried out McTony's fried chicken yet. "Trust me, you'll love it." They both entered the restaurant and saw that the whole place was already filled. There were no available seats for them to eat in. The friend was immediately hesitant. "I've heard that it can take 2 candles to wait for a seat inside. I'm sorry, but I can't wait that long." The returning customer couldn't refute his friend's complaint. Even though McTony's chicken was good, they would lose money if they delayed their trip by a brief moment. It wasn't worth it. "All right, I guess we'll part ways for now," said the returning customer. Unlike his friend, he thought that McTony's chicken was worth the wait. He saw his friend get up onto his horse, getting ready to go off into the distance. The man then returned to the restaurant and prepared himself to wait for 2 or 3 candle lights. "Hello, welcome to McTony's. May I take your order?" He was immediately greeted by a Lamia from the other side of the counter. He didn't recognize her, but judging from the uniform she wore and the symbol on her chest, it seemed that she was a recently hired employee of McTony's. "Can I have just 1 McTony's chicken, please?" "Certainly, sir. And since we don't have any tables for you to sit in, we'll have to make your order into a takeout," the Lamia said as she took his order. The man didn't know what she was talking about, but before he could question her, she walked back to the kitchen area and only returned about a few seconds later. She came out with a box on her hand and a smile on her face. Once she reached the counter, she plopped the box in front of him and said, "Here's your order, sir. Enjoy." Chapter 343, Castell's Problem. The man shook his head. "There must be something wrong. I just ordered a chicken." "Yes," Lamia replied, "and this is your order." She pushed the box towards him, and immediately, the unmistakable scent of spice and dragon's whiskers hit his nose. This was definitely the famous McTony's chicken that he had been craving. Yet, instead of waiting until his legs ached, the restaurant was able to deliver the chicken before he could even count the change they gave him. He almost couldn't believe it. What is this?" the man asked, befuddled. "This is a takeout order, sir. As the name implies, you can take out the chicken out of the restaurant and eat it wherever you like." The helpful Lamia opened the box for him, revealing the pristine and glistening skin of the chicken. He could almost imagine the crisp. A fork and a knife is included with the takeout, so you can consume it at home or in your carriage, she said, pointing to the wooden utensils right next to the chicken. The man couldn't believe it. This is amazing. It's so fast. And we don't have to wait a long time to get a seat anymore. That's right, sir. The Lamia smiled. Can I get another order? The man said, pushing a bunch of coins towards her. Certainly. It only took her another few seconds before a second box of chicken was given to him. The man ecstatically ran out of the restaurant carrying 2 takeout boxes of McTony's. There, he saw his friend just starting to ride his horse out of the truck stop and back onto the Golden Road. Wait! The man shouted. You won't believe what I have in my hands. His friend stopped in the middle of the road and wondered why he was acting so strange. And so, it wasn't long before the customers of McTony's became aware of the revolutionary takeout boxes that would completely change the food industry in the future. Back in Kingsbridge Town, in the very first building that Michael constructed for the Reborn Company, was Castell, who was being buried by tons and tons of paperwork involving the Reborn Company. As the acting CEO, she had a lot of responsibilities in keeping the company afloat. For example, she was practically in charge of all the trade and commerce happening in the King's region, which was quite stressful since one wrong move could cause the Reborn Company to lose millions in gold coins. But thanks to the talent and skills that Michael bestowed upon her, she was able to keep afloat and make the nation prosper even brighter than before. Because of this, she was being lauded by her peers in the King's region as the most successful businesswoman in recent years. However, all that applause and accolades gave no sense of happiness for the talented Castell. After all, her head was constantly getting filled with a sense of imposter syndrome. She didn't feel like she had done a good enough job for Michael and the Reborn Company. She was supposed to be the guiding hand that allows the nation to prosper, but instead, she was the one hindering it instead. This was because she was unable to find a solution to their problem of a lack of resources. All the ideas and proposals that she had been thinking of were all failures in terms of them not being able to secure more resources for the company. If she had done her job properly, then Michael wouldn't be worrying about this right now and just kept on expanding the nation faster than before. Of course, no one really thought that she was the reason for the scarcity. It was normal to have a lack of materials with how many projects were being made by the Reborn Company. However, Castell's sense of perfection couldn't let herself be happy with this. Because of that, she buried herself within her office, even when Michael was asking for her to join him in the Queen's region. Sigh! Castell stretched her arms and stifled a yawn. She was about to pull another all-nighter, when all of a sudden, she was visited by a shadow that flickered from the light bulb in her room. I'm here to report a finding, Miss Castell. The shadow formed into that of an Orcanine orc. Since she was the CEO, Michael always included her in everything that was happening in the company through the shadows of Reborn. He informed her of all, including McTony's and other such news inside the Queen's region. Not only that, but her status within the company allowed her to command a high shadow to become her personal assistant. This Orcanine orc was one such jonin or high shadow, and she had instructed him to tell her of any business prospect that the Reborn Company would come across. What is it? Castell asked, not letting her eyes stray away from her paperwork. There is some chatter within Angora City that there will be some guests visiting the southern tip of the Queen's region. It seems that these guests are considered big shots in the food industry, each one in the Golden 500 ranking. Finally, she looked up at the Orcanine. Her senses told her that this news was of big importance. Who are they and why do they want to visit Angora City? She asked, intrigued but cautious. There are 4 visitors in total. One is a representative from the 446th ranked company, another from a 431st ranked company, one from a 425th company, and the last but not least is a visitor from the 200th ranked company in the entire world. Castell was surprised upon hearing that. A 200th ranked company in the world was just about strong enough to contend in the global market. She didn't think that Reborn would encounter such a big shot so early in their expansion. What are their motives? Why do they want to visit Angora City? She asked. It was at this point that she stopped looking at her paperwork entirely. She was now focused on the orcs' next words. According to our sources, they are planning to expand their business in the southern tip of the Queen's region. We are guessing that they probably want to construct a franchise store in Angora City. Castell's eyes whizzed back and forth as she analyzed the situation. I'm guessing that the 3 lower-ranked companies are subsidiaries of the 200th ranked company. The Orcupine nodded. That is correct. They are all part of the same franchise of restaurants. But why now? Castell asked out loud. Is it because the Golden Road competition is getting much more fierce deeper in the Queen's region? That is our guess as well, the orc replied. And even though we cannot get close to the heart of the bastard bandits, we are getting enough gossip to know that Blazelle is informed about their arrival. She is most likely to try and make them ally with Corp. With the bastard bandits slowly losing their members, Blazelle was more likely to try and gather more allies from outside the bastard bandits. That was the only way she could try and contend with the growing power of Reborn. Chapter 344. Caravan of Chefs. An exotic caravan, almost as large as a small house, traveled through the unkempt dirt road through the forests and further down south of the Queen's region. The carriage itself was drawn by this extremely large monkey-like animal whose arms and legs had hooves like that of a horse. This horse-monkey hybrid skillfully pulled the caravan through the forest, going over mounds, in between trees, and even through a ravine without much trouble. After all, this animal was bred specifically for this type of travel, where there wasn't much of a road to travel on. Inside the carriage were 4 people, each one wearing expensive silk suits and robes that indicated their hierarchy in their society. They were very well off, to say the least. They were none other than the 4 representative chefs that had come to the south to expand their company's restaurants. The 3 of them sat on the seats to the side, while the last one was seated at the very back, where it was spacious enough to sleep comfortably in. They had been traveling for months now, trying to reach the southern tip of the Queen's region to find the optimal spot for their expansion. As they traveled through the forest, they were suddenly stopped by a few rugged individuals wielding knives on their belts. One look and the chefs could tell that they were bandits. We're being ambushed. They must be the infamous bastard bandits. Shall we pay the fee to them, Chef Gusto? Although they were all amazing chefs in their own right, they all regarded one person even more respectfully than their own names. He was Chef Castell, a man with dark skin, tightly braided hair, and sharp blue eyes. He laid on his side, with one hand supporting his head and one hand holding a grape branch to his mouth. He was part of the esteemed Pyramidic Cuisine Company, renowned for their amazing dishes and foods that were sought after even around the world. Because of that, their company was ranked number 200 in the Golden 500 list. If he wanted to, he could show his insignia to the bastard bandits and force them to retreat. Nobody in their right minds would want to mess with a top 200 company. We mean no harm, said one of the bandits. We are simply here to deliver a message from Blazelle Oscrope. Gusto and the other chef's eyes widened as they heard that. It was only now that they learned that Corp was able to take the bastard bandits under their wing. One of the bandits delivered a stamped letter to the window before they all disappeared into the woods, gone without a trace. The chefs delivered the letter to Gusto, who read it immediately. Chef Castell muttered as his eyes darted across the paper. Corp is offering us the territory of the bastard bandits in exchange for our help. The other chefs were pleasantly surprised to hear this. That's great. With the large territory of the forest, we can start creating a lot of restaurants for our expansion. We'll be able to carve a large chunk of land for ourselves before those inheritors set their sights on this place. Shall we accept their deal, Chef Castell? As usual, they all turned to the dark-skinned chef. Despite their excitement and enthusiasm, the decision was ultimately his to make. I am not so sure yet, he replied to them. Why not, chef? Didn't you want to start a restaurant that is made for travelers? This is the perfect place to do it, said one of the chefs. The reason that I left our homeland in the first place was because I want to experience something new. My tongue is itching for the exotic. It is the only bottleneck that is preventing me from advancing my culinary skills. Creating a new restaurant from scratch here in the forest will serve as a worthy challenge for me to sharpen my knife. But my heart is telling me that it is not enough, Chef Gusto professed. The other chefs went silent. For them, this forest would be the perfect place for them to expand their business. But chef, it is your company's aim to expand the business as much as possible. They would want to accept this deal, one of the chefs argued. Finally, Chef Gusto relented. Very well. If there is nothing else that interests me, then we shall take Flair Corp's offer and establish our restaurants in the forest. The other chefs rejoiced. Before that, though, let us visit Angora City to replenish our rations. Then we'll meet with Blazelle and the bastard bandits to discuss this deal further. After being in a cramped space for too long, the chefs finally saw a glimpse of civilization in the distance. Angora City, the place once known for its connection to a lot of places. But now it was just a shadow of what it once was, becoming isolated from the rest of the Queen's region. However, when they looked out the window and peered through the glass, they saw a strange sight. Angora City was now connected to 3 roads. One to the west, one to the east, and one to the south leading towards the King's region. They all looked at each other, wondering how this had happened. After all, from what they knew, Angora City had lost its power and influence from years of degradation of the original Golden Road. But now, they could see the city bustling with all sorts of businesses. There were these metal carriages going in and out of the gates by the hundreds. They had never even seen this type of carriage before, much less one that had no visible animal pulling on it. If they had known about this road, they could have saved themselves some trouble and simply followed it towards Angora City. Instead, they went the long way and traveled through the wilderness that took them months to cross. What has happened with Angora City? Has a sub-company from a conglomerate already got to it first? It's possible. Only a company with that much money could pull off something as grand as this. Don't you think so, Chef Gusto? The dark-skinned chef threw an empty grape branch to the side and took another one in the basket. I heard that Flair Corp has been eyeing Angora City for a long time, Chef Gusto muttered, plucking a grape from the branch. This is not their work. You must have all remembered how Batrock Town looked a few days ago. Angora City looks far too happy for it to be under Flair Corp. The 3 other chefs nodded in understanding. Only he could make a comment on those inheritors, those sub-companies under the top 10 conglomerates in the world. Chef Gusto was the only one among them that mingled in their world. Chef Gusto, how do you think Angora City is able to afford this road expansion? I don't know. We'll see when we get there, the dark-skinned chef said casually, chewing on the grape. Soon, the caravan moved closer and closer to Angora City, eventually letting them see the wonders of the automobiles and the new Golden Road.
Chapter 345, Chef Gusto.
Chef Gusto and their caravan entered Angora City. Their mount, which would have been considered quite normal in the majority of the territories in the Queen's region, now stuck out like a sore thumb in Angora City. In fact, they barely ever saw horse-drawn carriages anymore. Most of them were now these metal boxes that moved with tremendous speed and roared like a tiger. It was as if they had just stepped foot onto a different planet. They seemed to be the only ones who were weirded out on these metal vehicles. And it wasn't just the automobiles that surprised them. It was also the grand, ongoing renovation occurring all over the city. Every house seemed to be under construction with some kind of improvement, and every road seemed to be replaced by these gray flat stone-like materials. Angora City was undergoing a great change. This capital city has changed far too much, one of the chefs said. There must be a conglomerate controlling this, right? I do not think so. Or else we would have seen their symbols plastered on every wall and house in the streets. Then it must have been made by none other than the Duke himself. His name was Stellmain, if I remember correctly. This large of a construction project wouldn't be possible if it didn't have the Duke's permission. This made it even more likely that it was the Duke himself who started all this renovation in the city. It made even more sense when they put it into the current political context that Angora City was under. The looming threat of Corp must have spurred this great change as a way to protect themselves in the future. Of course, this guess was still hindered by the fact that a duke couldn't possibly gather this much money to create this change all by himself. But when they looked out onto the streets and saw the automobiles running through the roads, it all made sense. The duke earned money through those automobiles. If he didn't make them, then he must have taxed them and used that money to start the renovation. Of course, they were wrong. They were still under the assumption that the automobiles were just metal-like monsters that the duke tamed. But they didn't know that, and they weren't all that interested in finding out. After all, they were just visiting Angora City, not intending to stay here for a long time. Under this wrong assumption, they intended to visit the duke's castle and give him some congratulatory words. Unfortunately, when they arrived, they were greeted by the news that the duke was off somewhere in the king's region. King's region? Isn't that a barren wasteland? Asked the chef. He must be there for some business. Oh well, then we should head back east and seek out the bastard bandits' hideout. After they replenished their rations for the journey, the caravan of chefs were just about ready to journey out of Angora City. However, their arrival seemed to have alerted a lot of companies and parties interested in seeking out a relationship with them. Who wouldn't? The pyramidic cuisine was in the top 200 companies of the entire world. Any business would want to establish relations with them, even if it was just a brief contact. Chef Castell, we have just received welcoming letters from all companies in Angora City. They offer us their greatest hospitality. Some just wish to give us greetings, while others want to propose a business venture with us. But of course, Chef Castell, or more importantly, the pyramidic cuisine, was far too important to entertain the ramblings of companies that hadn't even reached the golden 500 yet. "Oh, there's one here, Chef Castell," said one of the chefs, handing the dark-skinned man a letter with our symbol stamped on the wax. "The Reborn Company," Castell muttered. "They have, of course, seen their symbols all over Angora City." It didn't take them long to find out that the Reborn Company was number 450th in the Golden 500 ranking during its debut, which was quite an impressive feat. And upon further investigation, the Reborn Company was the one who owned the automobiles in the first place. Not only that, but they were the ones who created the roads in the first place. Such a revelation completely stunned the chefs. Oh my God! There's no way a company like this spawned out of nowhere. They must be a secret sub-company of a conglomerate. No, the news would have spread by now. It says here in the newspaper that they were founded in the King's region and worked their way up here in a matter of a few years. How is this possible? Who is this Reborn Company? The three chefs accompanying Chef Castell were all part of restaurant businesses that were all ranked higher than Reborn. 446th, 431st, and 425th respectively. However, even they felt like they were being overwhelmed by Reborn's feats. After hearing about their article in the newspapers, they were sure that Reborn's true ranking was far higher than they had right now. "What do you think, Chef Gusto? Shall we accept their offer and meet with them for a business venture?" asked one of the chefs. The dark-skinned man subconsciously twirled his braids as he thought deeply. "No," he replied eventually. "Reborn seems to be focused on innovation and technology. We have nothing in common. There is no reason for me to connect with them, for it will only distract me from increasing my skill in cuisine." As Castell worked in her office, she heard a knock on the door. "Come in," she said. The man soon entered the room, making Castell stand up in deference towards him. "Master Bart." "Good morning to you," she said. The man was none other than Bart Vanderbilt, the man famous for his honor and duty, and also as the father of the great Michael Vanderbilt. "Please, I told you to just call me Bart. It's awkward since you're in a much higher ranking position than me." After he relinquished the Vanderbilt business in the Queen's region, Bart spent the rest of his days helping out Michael's business as an assistant to Castell, tending to matters that she was not accustomed to. For example, Bart had heard from the grapevine that a famous chef from the pyramidic cuisine had come to Angora City. Once he heard that, he was overcome with extreme nostalgia. After all, the pyramidic cuisine held a very special place in his heart, all because of one date back in his youth. It was where he met Lilia, and where he fell in love at first sight. During those days, the two of them were completely in love, with no discernible way of separating the two of them. However, things have changed recently. Both of them had become a lot more distant. They were still talking and spending time with each other, but the spark that was once there seemed to have been snuffed out by time. And so, the prospect of a chef from the Pyramidic cuisine coming to Angora City excited him the most. He could possibly relit the fire that was once in their hearts. But unfortunately, Castell brought bad news. "I have just received word that they rejected our proposal," she said, bowing earnestly towards Bart. Chapter 346, Rejection. Bart's face saddened. His excitement was sapped as soon as he realized that he wouldn't be able to give his wife the experience of dining with the famous Pyramidic cuisine. The chance for them to rekindle their love was not meant to be.
"I'm sorry.
"I lack the skills," Castell apologized, kneeling down on the ground. Bart immediately tried to hide his disappointment. "Hey, it's okay. It's not your fault," he assured her. The Pyramidic cuisine had always been reserved only for the elite of the elites. Even my influence as a Vanderbilt is not enough to guarantee me a spot in one of their restaurants. My brothers, sisters, and my grandfathers would have been able to, but not me. He was always the runt of the family. After all, he was the youngest out of all of them and didn't have the same talent in business as others. That was why he was only assigned the Vanderbilt business in the King's region. And even back then, the only reason he was able to get a spot in their restaurant was because his father, Is Vanderbilt, asked for a small favor from the owner of the Pyramidic cuisine. If not, then he probably wouldn't have met Lilia that day. "I really apologize," Castell said, biting her lips. "I do not think that I am worthy of this position any longer. Shall I ask the young master's help?" Bart shook his head. "No need to bother him with small stuff like this," he said. "I'm sure he's busy with other stuff." Back to the chef caravan, Gustav and his other cohorts prepared for their journey out of Angora City. After respectfully declining the invitation of numerous companies, they set out to the gates to travel eastwards. But just as they were about to move, Chef Castell suddenly jerked up from his laid-down position, startling the other chefs. "Is something the matter?" they asked him. Chef Castell raised his head up and sniffed the air. He closed his eyes and tried to follow the strange and exotic scent. "Open the windows," he hurried barked out. The other chefs had no choice but to do as he said. Once the window was open, the smell of that certain spice had grown ever more stronger than before. As an experienced and talented chef, Castell was able to tell from scent alone that something was a delicious meal. "Do you smell that?" Castell asked them. But the other chefs didn't have Castell's talent in cuisine. They weren't able to smell the hint of good food from over a kilometer away. "Turn our carriage around. Go westwards," he said to the chefs. His companions were all confused as to why he was acting this way, but they knew better than to disobey his orders. So, they knocked on the coach's window and ordered him to turn around. The man on the outside of their caravan skillfully pulled the reins on the monkey horse mount and quickly made a 180-degree turn. Their sudden change in directions almost caused them to crash onto an oncoming Reborn automobile taxi. But thankfully, the driver was able to push on the brakes just in time. "Beep beep. Hey, watch where you're going." Chef Castell didn't mind the almost accident and forced the carriage to move towards that scent. The smell was so strong that he could practically see it in the air. In his eyes, there was a red cloud of trailing smoke that was leading him towards the source of the scent. The caravan weaved through the traffic of automobiles, disobeying the road and traffic rules, all so that Chef Gustav could reach the source of that smell. And finally, after a few minutes, they reached it. Just towards the western gate of Angora City, there were these demi-human construction workers who were taking a break from working on an underground project. They all gathered near a pile of concrete and stone rubble, with their uniforms all dirted and stained. However, they didn't seem to care at all. They just sat on the ground, munching on something that looked crispy and red. Chef Castell couldn't take it anymore and jumped out of the carriage, surprising the other chefs. The dark-skinned man ran towards the construction workers, who only noticed his arrival once he was face to face with them. "Ha! H.A.? Excuse me," Chef Gustav said, catching his breath. "What is that?" He pointed to the delicious and juicy chicken they held in their hands. "Oh, this," said one of the yellow Hobmanki workers. "This is McTony's chicken." This piece of chicken was the source of that smell. Surprise and amazement flowed through Chef Gustav's face. He thought that the scent would lead him to a high-end restaurant in the city, or at the very least, an undiscovered gem of an eatery just by the side of the street. He didn't expect this delicious-looking food to be eaten on the ground. There wasn't even a restaurant or an establishment anywhere around here. Where did they even get that? That, can I take a bite?" he asked. Although Chef Castell was a well-renowned chef in his homeland. Right now, he just looked like a beggar who hadn't had a bite to eat for a whole week. It didn't help the fact that he was staring intently at their food. Sure. Here, take a fork," the Hobmanki said, sticking a piece of chicken on the prongs. Castell looked at the utensil. It was made out of wood. But any questions he had about this were put aside when he smelled the chicken. Oh, the chicken. He could smell the clashing and mixture of spices inside the chicken, giving that unique, overwhelming scent that brought him all the way here. And finally, in the moment of truth, Castell took a bite. Crunch. And immediately, the crispy skin cracked under his teeth. Soon after, the white meat of the chicken brought its juices towards his mouth, giving him the full taste of its spices. He chewed on it again, combining the crispy skin and the juicy meat of the chicken into an experience that created a slew of explosions in his mouth. "I never knew dragon's whiskers could be used this way," Castell muttered with moist eyes. This food was a revelation to his tongue.
Chef Gustav.
"Are you all right? Why did you run all the way here? Is that chicken?" Gustav looked at the other chefs and nodded. "You must try this chicken. It's so good." The other chefs looked at the construction workers, who were just quietly eating their own lunch. They could hardly believe that a meal eaten on the ground would strike the fancy of the famous Chef Castell. But in the end, the construction workers generously shared a piece of chicken to them, letting them have a taste of McTony's chicken. And soon, their eyes widened and their chewing got more intense. The flavoring recipe of this chicken was something that even they, as professional chefs, could appreciate. "Oh my God! This chicken is so good. It is a wonderful use of spices and ingredients. I dare say this is a masterpiece." Chef Castell looked at the construction workers and couldn't help but bow in appreciation of them. "I would like to give my compliments to the chef. Which one of you is the mastermind of this delicious meal?" he asked them. The construction workers all looked at each other. Finally, the yellow Hobmanki told them the truth. "We just got this as takeout from McTony's." Chapter 347, Castell visits. Takeout? It was at this point that Chef Castell noticed the weird, paper-like plate that they were using to eat from. It was very unusual. "Yeah, we don't have time to eat in the restaurant, so we just took it out and ate it here," the yellow Hobmanki answered. "Where is this restaurant that you spoke of?" "McTony's, right?" The construction workers gave directions to the chefs on where to find McTony's. "Wait, are you going to use your carriages to get there? It's too slow." The chefs almost felt offended by the demi-human words. After all, their mount was considered one of the fastest monsters available in the market. "What do you suggest?" Castell asked. "Just use a reborn taxi. It's much faster," the yellow Hobmanki suggested. Chef Castell was feeling impatient to see this McTony's restaurant, so he accepted their suggestion and sought out the yellow and black automobiles riding around the roads. With some help from the construction workers, the chefs found a taxi that would take them to the truck stop at the fastest time possible. As the door to the automobile opened and they saw the interior, they were quite disappointed to see that it was quite cramped for them. "Chef Gustav, are we sure that this is okay? Isn't it better to just use our carriage?" The dark-skinned man didn't answer and just entered the front seat of the car. Seeing their leader enter, the other chefs eventually followed suit and 3 of them sat perfectly on the back seat. "To McTony's, is that correct?" the human driver asked. Chef Castell nodded and paid the fee. All right, just sit tight and make yourselves comfortable. The driver personally adjusted Chef Castell and the other passengers' seats to decline into an almost laid-down position. And with just one push of a button, the chefs felt a cool air rush over towards their face, battling the intense heat of the sun around them. Whoa, this is very comfortable. How is it so cold here? It only took a few seconds before the chefs took back their words and fully appreciated the beauty of an automobile. I could get used to this. I wish we had this back in our carriage. Is the animal inside this metal from the Arctic, or does it have an affinity to ice magic? The driver chuckled. There's no monster inside this automobile, he explained. It's all just thanks to the engine that transforms. He went on to explain the basic physics on how an engine worked. As a Rebornian driver, he was bestowed a passable amount of knowledge about engines when he awakened his talent so that he would be able to make repairs if the car broke down. The chefs, of course, couldn't understand a word out of his mouth. So, they were still skeptical to believe that this vehicle ran on only a liquid called fuel. Sit back tight, I'll get you there as fast as possible, the driver said as he stepped on the gas pedal. And immediately, the car accelerated off the gates and out into the golden road. The chefs held onto each other from fright. They never knew automobiles could run this fast. The only one who seemed to enjoy this new experience was Chef Castell, who put his hand out of the windows and felt the gush of wind brush past his palms. And so, the taxi set off onto the golden road, riding on the fast lane. The chefs cautiously peeked out the window and saw how they zoomed past a traditional horse-drawn carriage who rode on the right side of the highway. Holy smokes! One of the chefs uttered out. The carriage was getting left behind in the dust. Even the elite mounts in the Queen's region wouldn't stand a chance against these automobiles. It was only now that they truly understood the power of automobiles. With this car, they could shorten days of travel into just a few candlesticks of time. After some time, they finally arrived at their destination. In the distance, Chef Castell saw a moon-like radiance glowing among the starry skies of the dark night. Upon closer inspection, he realized that it was not a moon, but a glowing symbol of a smoking chicken instead. Above it was the name, McTony's. The symbol was hoisted up by a pillar, letting everyone see the symbol even from far away. So that's McTony's, Gusto uttered in complete amazement. Even the other chefs were stunned into silence. Eventually, the car slowed down as they veered off the road and entered the truck stop. The scent of the chicken wafted through the air, tempting Castell to come closer. You guys can go out now. It'll take some time to find a parking spot. It's very crowded this time of the night, the driver said. They all got out of the taxi and just like he said, the restaurant was filled to the brim with customers inside. Entering the doors, they were met with a large line of people waiting in line by the counter. It's so crowded in here, said one of the chefs. How are we going to find our seats? However, just when they were discussing amongst themselves, someone called out to them. Excuse me, a woman behind them said. Please move. There's a lot of people behind you. They looked forward and saw the large line had already dwindled down. They were caught unaware that the line had already moved. It only took a little more time before it was finally their turn to order a chicken. Hello, may I take your order? The perky Lamia cashier greeted. For chickens, please, Castell muttered out as he pushed a pile of coins towards her. The cashier accepted his order, and before she even finished counting the coins, another attendant behind her took out 4 boxes from the back and delivered it to her. Here's your order and your change. Thank you, please come again. Castell and the other chefs had their jaws on the floor. That fast? Their order was here just like that? Even the best chefs or the best restaurants in the world couldn't give out orders at that speed. Excuse me, we ordered a chicken, and there's only a box here. Where's the plate? One of the chefs asked. This is the plate, the Lamia answered with a smile. Just open this box, and you can eat the chicken anywhere you like. She opened one of the boxes and showed them a pristine-looking juicy chicken that was still steaming hot right out of the kitchen. The chefs were completely bewildered as they looked at their chicken takeout boxes. They looked at the cashier and she was already tending to the next customer. This was perhaps the fastest service they had ever experienced. This, Chef Gustav muttered under his breath. What is it? They asked him. This is it. This is what I've been looking for this entire time. The other chefs were a little bit surprised. Although the chicken was good, it wasn't life-changing or anything like that. There were other cuisines much more delicious than this. You really like the chicken that much, Chef Gustav? The dark-skinned chef shook his head.
No.
I'm talking about this takeout order. Chapter 348, Regret for the Chefs. As a chef from the Pyramidic Cuisine Company, Gustav served kings, queens, and royals most of the time. However, because of the exclusivity within their customer base, he never really got a chance to let the majority of people taste his cooking. When he was a kid, he had always wanted the whole world to love the food that he cooked personally, and he worked hard to become a well-renowned chef. However, that came at a cost. He was only allowed to serve a select group of people, only those who were millionaires, influential figures, or powerful people. And if he were being honest, this was the reason why he had been stuck as a 6-star chef for 10 whole years. But after seeing how McTony's operated their restaurant and how they served their customers, Gustav felt like he had just discovered who he truly was. He wasn't a chef who served only the elites. He was a chef who served anyone who wanted to eat. He felt like he was close to getting a breakthrough. We have to talk with the owner of this restaurant, he said to the other chefs. It's decided. We're going to be locating our new restaurants here, right next to McTony's. And we're going to emulate what they are doing. The other chefs were surprised with the amount of enthusiasm on Chef Gustav's face. He was practically beaming. And once he was decided, they knew that there was nothing to stop him. So, they accompanied him over to the counter and requested a meeting with the chef. The Lamia cashier replied, Certainly, before she went over to the kitchen and fetched a middle-aged man who seemed to be balding on the top part of his hair. You must be the chef. My compliments to you, said Gustav with gusto. What's your name? I'm Tony, the chef replied, and behind him, a little boy the age of 9 peeked out in between his legs. And this is my son Remy. We are both operating this restaurant. The two chefs shook hands and immediately, Tony realized that he was speaking with someone who was his peer. The scent of spice wafted over his nose, something that only experienced chefs would emanate from spending years of their life in the kitchen. Greetings, Chef Tony. This is the esteemed Chef Gustav from the Great Pyramidic Cuisine, one of the chefs said, introducing their leader. However, Tony's reception wasn't all that great. He didn't even seem to recognize the name of the 200th ranked company at all. Ahem, coughed the other chef. Gustav has been invited to cook in both Atlantis and Draconia, something that only a few chefs have had the honor to do. Again, Tony didn't look all that impressed. He just kept looking back at the kitchen, worried that the chickens were going to overcook. Chef Gustav waved off the other chef's attempts to brag. Never mind that, he said. I simply want to congratulate you on creating a fast but efficient way to serve your customers. It's so good that I want to copy it for myself. The dark-skinned chef chuckled to himself. In fact, that is why I have called you here. I want to strike a deal with you to help me transform my restaurant into something like yours. Tony ruffled Remy's hair and gave Chef Gustav an awkward look. That's great and all, but I'm not the one you should be crediting for this. I only cook the chicken. As for the restaurant itself, my boss is the one who created all this. Chef Gustav tilted his head. You're not the owner of this restaurant? We're the subsidiary of another company, Tony revealed. Who? Reborn. A horrified look washed over Gusto and the other chefs' faces. Regret started to settle into their hearts. Just a few days ago, Chef Gustav heartlessly rejected their proposal for a meeting, thinking that it was not worth their time. Though Reborn was in the 450th spot in the rankings, the Pyramidic Cuisine was in the top 200th. They thought that they wouldn't ever need the help of a lower-ranked company. But now, he learned that perhaps Reborn was the key to his advancement in culinary skills. Michael's takeout option for McTony's chicken was a resounding success. Not only were they able to solve the problem of overcrowding in the restaurant, but they were also able to bring in a lot more customers in the process. Having people eat on the road and away from the restaurant served as a good marketing stunt that made people aware of the restaurant in the middle of the Golden Road. He had even heard of people specifically traveling to the truck stop just to get a taste of McTony's. One particular day, he was relaxing in their headquarters in Angora City, when all of a sudden, he was visited by Shina, who had some news for him. "Lord Michael, there are a few people here to meet you," she said. "Who are they?" he asked. "It's the chefs, Lord Michael." Of course, he had heard about the pyramidic cuisine caravan that visited Angora City. The shadow orcs had been keeping him up to date with them at all times. He had even heard about their refusal to Castell's invitation. Now, he wasn't all that offended by it, but he knew that Castell was taking it hard on herself for this failure, even though he didn't consider it to be one at all. "Are they here because of McTony's?" Michael asked. Shina pursed through the papers in her hands and nodded. "According to our shadows, they have just recently returned from a visit to the truck stop, where they met with Tony. He told them to come here and meet with you themselves." "All right, bring them in," he said to Shina. The white-scaled dragonborn dutifully walked back out of the room and fetched the visitors on the first floor. Meanwhile, Michael sent out one of his shadows in the King's region and transported Castell directly to Angora City. The maid-turned-CEO was completely surprised by this sudden transfer. "Young master," she said, bowing to him, "I didn't expect to meet with you. We're about to have an important meeting with someone. As the CEO of our company, your expertise is needed here." Castell immediately shook her head and backed away from Michael. "Oh no, young master. I was unable to fulfill the duties of a CEO properly. I failed constantly. I have failed in procuring materials for your projects. And now, I have failed in connecting with the pyramidic cuisine. They're probably going to side with Corp now." Michael patted her back and consoled her. "There was nothing you could have done back then. But now you can change that. We're meeting with the chefs right now." Castell's eyes widened. And before she could even protest, the door opened and 4 distinguished chefs came inside Michael's office. The dark-skinned man with braided hair immediately walked over to Michael to shake his hand. "Nice to meet you. It is an honor to greet the man who invented the takeout boxes," Castell said, his eyes filled with genuine praise. Chapter 349. Negotiations with the chefs. "Let's cut to the chase," Chef Castell said, sitting down at the table opposite Michael. "I want to establish our new restaurant on your Golden Road." Michael wasn't surprised. It seemed that the dark-skinned chef was able to see through the potential of a fast-food restaurant. "I guess there is merit to him being one of the top chefs in his company," Michael thought. "Rejoice!" one of the chefs beside Castell proclaimed. "Having Chef Castell's restaurant established in your territory is a privilege that many people would kill to have. Now, shall we talk about the split of profits and the fees? We propose that we will pay a 0.5% fee of profits to the Reborn Company in exchange for using your territory as the base of our restaurant." But before the other chefs could start the discussions, Michael raised his hand, stopping the conversation dead in its tracks. "Wait," he said. "I haven't agreed yet." His words were like an alien language to the 3 chefs. If a top chef from a 200th ranked company in the world asked to establish a restaurant in your territory, then you should accept it without a second thought. But it seemed that Michael didn't get this memo. "Are you saying you reject Chef Gusto?" they asked Michael. "I didn't say that. I'm simply saying that the negotiations aren't over. I haven't heard much of an offer from you yet." They were even more flabbergasted upon hearing that. It was supposed to be the other way around. Michael should be the one trying to convince Chef Castell to cook in his territory. Yet, Michael was the one talking like he was the one to be wooed. It's not only his name that he carries, but also the brand of the pyramidic cuisine, argued one of the chefs. Not only that, but all the subsidiaries under the pyramidic cuisine will follow suit with his move. Our companies are all ranked in the lower 400th spot, which is, respectfully, higher than Reborn. You should be the one trying to add benefits to this agreement to satisfy Chef Castell's liking. Michael remained calm while the three chefs tried to argue with him. "And why would I do that?" Michael asked, leaning on his chair, relaxed. "I know just how valuable that spot would be in the future. The truck stop will be visited by millions of people every month." Then, Michael gestured for Shina to come closer and bring the papers she had been holding in her hands. She spread it around the table, letting Castell and the chefs see all the different offers Reborn got just today. "You guys are not the only ones who have noticed the popularity of McTony's. Almost every restaurant in Angora City is begging me to let them have a spot in the truck stop. And with what they're offering, I see no reason for you to have a spot over them." The chefs frantically looked over the contract applications. Their eyes widened when they saw the figures. A 20-year locked lease? Profit sharing? One is even willing to be your subsidiary? They couldn't believe how much these restaurants were willing to offer just to have a spot in the truck stop. "In fact, I shouldn't even be entertaining your offers. Didn't you reject my CEO's offer when she asked you to meet with her? I recall your letter calling it a waste of time." The other chefs cringed, regretting the words they sent on that letter. They were acting with the pride of a ranked 200th company, so they thought that they could get away with such harsh words without any consequences. "Chefs, Michael is right," Castell nodded, aware of his own mistakes. "We are the ones who should be begging to be let inside the truck stop business. You saw how even this single McTony's is beating even our best restaurants in terms of customers. It will only grow more in the future." Michael gave him a nod of approval. It seemed that this chef Castell wasn't as bad as he thought. He was a level-headed thinker who didn't let his pride get in the way of his reasoning. "I do not apologize for rejecting the meeting with her, but I do apologize for saying that it is a waste of time," Chef Castell said. "I'm not the one that you should say that to," Michael said. "You guys should talk to her." He pointed at Castell, who had been listening to the conversation behind Michael's chair. "Who is she?" one of the chefs asked. "She's the one you should be trying to curry favor with. She's my CEO." Michael got up from his chair and pushed Castell to sit directly opposite the chefs. All of them were surprised. Castell didn't expect to be put in the hot seat, and the chefs were surprised that she held such a high spot in the Reborn Company. They didn't think that a CEO would wear a maid's uniform of all things. "Young master," Castell whispered hurriedly to Michael, "you should be the one negotiating with them. I'm not qualified to do it." But instead, Michael just gave her a reassuring pat and a smile. "She'll be negotiating on my behalf. Don't underestimate her, or you'll find yourself selling even your own left foot without even knowing it," he said, winking. Castell, being put in such a high-stakes position, couldn't help but fiddle her fingers while the four chefs stared at her. "Okay, we'll relent. Our company will pay a 2-year lease up front and a locked contract for another 3 more years," one of the chefs said, standing up to try and intimidate Castell. The CEO of Reborn tapped her fingers anxiously before she slammed her hands on the table, surprising the chefs. "Not enough," Castell shouted. Michael smiled as he watched on the sidelines. Castell's talent in business was finally showing its fruit. She had only been hindered by her low self-esteem because of her low upbringing, but he knew that she would overcome it in the end and turn into the ruthless businesswoman that he knew she could become. Her intuition as she navigated through the negotiations were top-notch. The chefs were left completely stunned as she took more than what they were prepared to bargain for. In the end, the chefs would get a permanent spot in the truck stop right now. If they wanted a spot for the future truck stops, then they would have to negotiate with Castell again. Not only that, but they would have to use Reborn products for their restaurant. They would use concrete, they would use ingredients bought from Reborn, and they would also buy automobiles to transport those ingredients to the restaurant itself. As for their payment, Castell perfectly negotiated a very favorable deal for Reborn. They would pay them in terms of materials and resources. Even Michael was excited as she gave them this ultimatum. It immediately solved all their problems about their lack of materials. More automobile construction, more golden roads, more truck stops, and most importantly, they could finally build the roller coaster that had been stuck in Michael's head for a long time. Chapter 350. Another win for Reborn. After the one-sided negotiations with the chefs, Castell was left extremely happy with the result. She was practically glowing, skipping as she did the paperwork on her desk. All in all, Michael was extremely pleased with the outcome. First of all, they had allied themselves with a 200th ranked company. Second, they were able to extract more resources out of them to fuel their ever-growing expansion. And third and most important of all, Castell had gained back her confidence as a CEO. She had proven to him and herself that she could handle these high-stakes negotiations even better than him. Now, Michael was sure that Castell would become another unstoppable force in the Reborn Company that would help him tackle the Queen's region as they expanded further north. "It will be a pleasure to work with you," said Chef Castell, shaking hands with Michael. "I think so too," he replied. "Since you are a friend of Reborn, consider our headquarters your own home. You can stay here while we build your new residence in Angora City." That was also included in their benefits. Reborn would have to help them create their restaurants and their homes here in the southern tip of the Queen's region. They would have to pay for the whole thing, of course. "I think it's better if we visit the truck stop first. It will be good to be acquainted with Chef Tony and his restaurant." Michael nodded, agreeing with the man's humbleness in defeat. "Now if you'll excuse me, I'll have to console my chefs," Castell said, walking towards the three other chefs who looked quite downtrodden after the negotiations. They didn't know how they're going to explain to their own companies how they let Castell take so many benefits from the negotiation. This left them quite depressed despite the conclusion of the negotiation. Michael's meeting with Chef Castell caused quite a stir within the companies in Angora City as well as the other territories. It became apparent that an agreement had been made between the two of them when they saw Chef Castell and the other chefs getting escorted by Rebornians and staying in Rebornian territoires. It made the news again. Somehow, the 450th ranked company was able to strike a deal with a 200th ranked company. After a little more digging, many people found out about the nature of this deal. It was a spot in the truck stop. Many people had been quite aware of McTony's success at this point, and they were all interested in becoming a part of it. However, once they found out that even the famous pyramidic cuisine was interesting, the frenzy increased to massive levels. Castell was bombarded with more requests for a spot in the truck stop. However, there were only about 20 slots in the truck stop, and about 50 were all vying for one. As expected of Castell, she was able to leverage this demand to squeeze more benefits from those who want a spot. She was able to include a resources clause within the agreement which required all parties to fund building construction with their own materials and a little bit extra for Reborn. All in all, Michael found himself having enough resources to fund all of his projects and more for the future. This was extremely good news. Meanwhile, in the depths of the forest east of Angora City, the hideout of the bastard bandits was getting lit aflame by a very angry woman because of some bad news she had just discovered. "What? How is this possible?" she screamed, fire almost manifesting behind her. "They were able to snatch Chef Castell from right under our noses. We even offered them this whole forest." What did Reborn offer them? The bastard bandits were silent. They knew nothing. They were unable to spy on the Reborn Company despite all their efforts. The only reason they were able to find out about this news was because it was written in the newspapers of Angora City. Wayno waited for a few seconds and delivered her another blow. "Some of our bandits found out that Reborn has started their construction of the Golden Road in the forest." Blazelle turned to him with a glare. "That is it," she roared. "I am declaring an all-out war against Reborn. Use all our forces to destroy any progress they have with their Golden Road." Wayno scratched the stump on his missing hand. "Almost half of us are already missing. Those bandits who tried to attack Reborn had all gone missing, never to return. And it was all thanks to Blazelle and her idiotic move of fighting outside the forest. I don't care. Do it or else I'll burn all of you myself," she warned. Wayno pursed his lips and walked out of her room. Regrettably, he would have to send more of his men out there fighting a losing battle. Meanwhile, Michael felt extremely pleased and immediately teleported himself back to the nation of Reborn. He was welcomed by Lolo, who reported to him about all the fairies' shenanigans while he was gone. As expected, they had gone on an eating spree and consumed any emotion they could sense. Locals and tourists alike found themselves being victims of pranks, mostly harmless, to induce emotions within them. They would report seeing strange lights hovering above them, whispering and egging them on to do things even late at night. "Sigh, where's Vivy?" he asked Lolo. The yellow Hobmanki Sr. led Michael to the baseball arena, where a game was currently ongoing. It was already night, and the stadium lights were on full blasts as two teams battled it out. It was the Kingsbridge Drivers versus the fan-favorite Engineers. The Kingsbridge Drivers were considered to be the lesser of the two since their team had just recently formed. Compared to the Engineers who had been practicing since baseball started, their skill level was definitely lacking. However, when Michael looked at the large scoreboard, he was surprised to see the Drivers leading 7-4 in the ninth inning. There were crying and shouts of disappointment as the fan-favorite star player from the Engineers missed another ball. It was quite strange for him to perform this badly. And sure enough, Michael saw the culprit FO this whole ordeal. Unbeknownst to the disappointed crowd and the players, there were these small spots of light wandering around the baseball field. Whenever a ball would be pitched, one of those lights would alter the trajectory at the last second, forcing the batter to miss the hit or the outfielder to catch the ball. The Fairies were making the Engineers lose. Now, it was pretty obvious why they were doing this. Even when he was not a fairy himself, he could sense the massive disappointment and sadness within the crowd. It was a feast for the Fairies. Thankfully, this was just an exhibition game and the standings didn't matter. But still, the Fairies had crossed a line. Immediately, he entered the dugout of the Engineers. Everyone was surprised to see him and bowed to his presence. He kept walking until he was face to face with the star player of the team. Then, he reached for the guy's cap and pinched it, revealing a sneaky little fairy hiding beneath it. It was Vivy. Chapter 351, Fairy's Punishment. Vivy chuckled, pointing at her cheeks and tilting her head innocently. "What did I tell you about messing with other people's emotions? But this nation is so yummy. Everyone's emotions are so heightened that we can eat all of them." The other fairies finally revealed themselves, all showing up above the players' heads. "That doesn't excuse you all from interfering with other people's lives." Michael was mad at himself for letting the fairies loose on his nation. They were like a feral dog who had been caged up their whole lives and he had just presented them with a buffet of bones and meat. No wonder they couldn't help themselves. It was also his fault that he hadn't made the roller coaster yet. Vivy and the other fairies all bowed their heads in shame once they saw Michael's disappointment in them. "Sorry," Vivy muttered, with her hands behind her back. The other fairies followed suit and apologized to the baseball players for interfering with their work. "It's okay, boss," said one of the players. "It's just an exhibition game anyway, and they'll become Rebornian in the future, right? So that means we're family." "Yeah, we're fine with it. I should even thank them. Trying to hit a wild ball like that helps me improve my game." Despite being toyed with, the Rebornian baseball players weren't all that mad upon discovering the fairies' pranks. Instead, they were quite understanding of their situation. Even though they didn't know much about fairies, they did know that they needed emotions to sustain themselves. Lolo had told them that the fairies were Michael's guests, so it was their responsibility as Rebornians to make them feel as accommodated as possible. If it meant losing a meaningless game to help them feel happy and content, then they were more than okay with it. The players then introduced themselves to the fairies, expressing their disbelief at their existence. Many thought they were just myths, but here they were in the lands of Reborn. The fairies were quite surprised at the Rebornians' reactions. They didn't know what to do. Whenever they had pranked someone for their emotions, their victims would always feel repulsed by the fairies. They would detest their actions and run away from them, or worse, try to kill them. After all, being toyed around like that wasn't a pleasant experience. It made them feel vulnerable, which was why most reactions were a fight or flight response. But for the first time in all their lives, they were being welcomed by their victims. The Rebornians were all well-adjusted and content. They knew that the fairies didn't mean any harm, and they didn't get any hurt by their actions. They all stood around awkwardly as the Rebornian baseball players tried to talk to them. However, the fairies didn't know how to. They mumbled their words, unable to say anything back. They had always stayed in the dark, never interacting with other species. But now they were in the spotlight. Even the mischievous Vivy was left speechless. "What is this?" she asked herself. There was something on her chest. A warm feeling. She couldn't quite understand it. As Michael watched all of this unfold, a smile washed over his face. "I just thought up your punishment," he said to them. "For now, until I say so, you can't consume the emotions of anyone. Instead, you have to work and experience the nation of Reborn for yourself."
No hiding anymore.
The fairies were horrified. "Don't worry. It will only last until the roller coaster is constructed. If you fail, and I'll know if you do, then I'll escort you out of our nation and you won't be able to reap the fear from the roller coaster rides." Vivy's face was like that of the famous Scream painting. "Good luck," he said to them. "Why don't you all start with baseball? See how hard it was to play it yourself and understand why it was so frustrating to have it be sabotaged." And so, the fairies were given an ultimatum. They couldn't consume the emotions of people until they have experienced that very emotion they would like to consume. They want to consume the emotion of someone eating pizza for the first time? Then they should eat pizza themselves first. They want to consume the frustration of a baseball player unable to hit the ball? Then they should try batting a ball too. It was an eye for an eye kind of situation that Michael hoped would teach the fairies that emotions shouldn't be toyed with. Other fairies adjusted quite easily, talking and interacting with people. Meanwhile, some found it quite hard and found themselves unable to show themselves to the public. Vivy was one of those. She loved to play pranks and manipulate the emotions of someone. However, she was forbidden to do so. Michael made sure of that by having her always follow him around. "I need emotion," she said haggardly. There were dark marks under her eyelids, as if she hadn't slept in 2 days even though Michael only implemented the rule just a few hours ago. "Just follow me around and live life for yourself," he said to her. "Why don't you help me with my survey for our potential customers for the roller coaster?" Michael planned to scour the whole nation of Reborn for lots of demi-human varieties in the hopes of finding out what scared them. For example, he just found out that dogfolk were scared of lightning. This gave Michael an idea of adding some electrical sparks in the roller coaster to make it more scary for dogfolk. There were plenty of other demi-human species with weird weaknesses that he had yet to find out. "Oh, come on. That's boring. Can't I just consume their emotions and find out from their memories? Why do I have to ask them?" Vivy complained. But before Michael could answer, he saw a shadow emerge beneath his feet. It was the shadow orc chieftains, Narito and Sasuke. "What is it?" he asked them. "Bu-tutu. The Golden Road Project has officially stepped foot in the Eastern Forest, boss. It had been going great ever since the fairies allowed us on their turn."
Rahtata.
However, another problem arose. The bandits had finally shown their hand and are planning a massive attack on our construction workers at this very moment. Michael knew this was serious. After many weeks of their failed attacks on Reborn territory, Blazelle and the bastard bandits finally had enough. "Tell our forces to suit up. We have to protect our construction workers." Even though he had given them all 35% chocolate pellets, he knew that it wasn't enough to protect themselves against a horde of bandits, especially on their territory. Not only that, but Blazelle posed a very serious problem that even he was not sure he could solve. "I have already done so, boss," Narito said, slapping his own arms. "I have also made sure to have my high shadows scour the area for any bandits to pick off before the confrontation starts. My high shadows are protecting the construction workers as we speak. They'll be sure to protect them while waiting for the Dragonborns," Sasuke added. Michael sat down and leaned on his knees. "How many forces are we expecting?" "About 1,000, sir. The bastard bandits are a collection of diverse human and demi-human demographics." His eyebrows raised, an idea forming in his head. What if he multitasked, fighting the bastard bandits while experimenting on roller coaster features? Chapter 352. Prepping for a fight. One of the current problems in creating a roller coaster fit for this world was finding something thrilling enough that would scare even demi-humans. He tasked Lolo, the mayor who knew every single Rebornian citizen and tourist by name, to survey all the different species of demi-humans to find their weaknesses. As expected of the talented yellow hobmonkey, he was able to procure a comprehensive list on everyone's kryptonite. For example, dogfolk hated lightning, lamias hated flying, while satyrs were afraid of death in general. But of course, he just couldn't simply implement those features in a roller coaster and call it a day. He needed to find out the right amount of dosage to make it thrilling but safe. He didn't want anyone to get really hurt from this roller coaster, just scared to their wits' end. One of his ideas was to get a paid, voluntary test group that would test the limits of these features. However, that would take a lot of time, something he currently did not. Just when he solved his resources problems, Blazelle and the bastard bandits came in and basically waged an all-out war against Reborn. So, he thought that he would have to postpone the construction of the roller coaster to another time. But as fate would have it, Michael realized that this was the perfect opportunity to test his ideas. After all, the bastard bandits were a diverse group filled with miscreants from different groups and species. They were even more diverse than some cities, having both human and demi-human members, with the latter comprised of many different bloodlines. He first visited Sleazy back in prison to help him get a feel of all the members of the bastard bandits. "Yeah, boss. Most of our members come from delinquents from all over the Queen's region. We don't discriminate against any species. You can practically find at least one member of every demi-human group in the entirety of the Queen's region." Sleazy was busy in art class, painting a flower as he talked to Michael. "That's great. Can you tell us their positions and where they're located?" "Sure can, boss. I'll give the list to Mrs. Shina later." "Thanks," Michael said, patting the reformed bandit's back. "By the way, we need your help in fighting the bastard bandits. Some orcs will come for you later and transport you to the battlefield. Be prepared for them." Sleazy put on a serious face and nodded. This was what he and the other bandits had been waiting for this entire time. Although there were plenty of bastard bandits in the prison right now thanks to their efforts, there were still more out there forced to work for Corp. But now they had a chance to recover all their members. "We are at your service, boss." Even the other prisoners saluted at Michael. Thanks to Sleazy, Michael had a comprehensive list of every demi-human species in the bastard bandits, including their rank and their position within the group. And combined with the information from the shadow orcs, he was able to predict which demi-human groups were most likely to attack. For example, it was most likely that a group of dogfolk bandits would attack first to try and destroy the progress of the Golden Road. Now, with this information, Michael consulted one of the very finest minds in all of the nation of Reborn, Griev. "Ho ho, you have come to the right man," Griev said, his jaw clicking as he laughed. True enough, Michael thought that there was no one better than to lead this fight against the bastard bandits other than Griev himself. After all, the skeleton was a general in his previous life, and at the very top of his field too. He died a 9-star general from the human emperor himself. "I used to decimate a 10,000 army with just a single platoon. At least, I think so." Of course, the skeleton man's amnesia could be some cause for concern, but his battle IQ was the real thing. And besides, they were just fighting a bunch of bandits with no real coordination within themselves. Griev could defeat an army like them in his sleep, at least he thought so. "Can you implement these weaknesses in your plans?" Michael asked, showing him a list that Lolo compiled for him. "You'll have to use lightning for the dogfolk bandits. Use spider silk too." Michael and Griev both worked together through the night as they planned for the fight against the bandits. The nation of Reborn didn't really have an army as of yet. They only had the Dragonborns and the state troopers. That was it. In terms of numbers, the bandits definitely had the advantage. But of course, Rebornians had a few tricks up their sleeves that could turn the tides at the heat of the battle, namely the 35% concentrated chocolate pellets. As expected, the skeleton general proved himself to be quite masterful in his deployment of troops, as well as the planning of the experiments. "Okay, this is pretty good for now," Michael said as he looked at a 3D topographical map of the forest east of Angora City. On the bottom right was the Golden Road currently under construction. On the top left was a cave-in between two mountains, where the bastard bandits' hideout was located. Michael also created some mini-figurines that depicted the location of where the bastard bandits were most likely to strike. They were located in the middle of the map. That was where they would install the roller coaster experiments. Meanwhile, the mini-figurines of the Dragonborns were positioned on the right side, protecting the Golden Road. After all, this was the very goal of the bastard bandits, or Blazelle to be more accurate. Meanwhile, they were aiming to reach the bastard bandits' hideout, defeating groups of bandits on the way, hoping to convert them to their side. Once they reached the cave, they would finally confront the ringleader of this whole assault. Ho ho ho! I'm getting quite excited, Michael. My blood is boiling. Oh wait, I don't have blood. The very next day, Michael teleported himself onto the very edge of the Golden Road inside the forest. Construction was halted during this whole war with the bandits, so this would be their base for the entire fight. The Rebornian engineers and construction workers used their time to build a small fort within the forest, where all their forces would sleep and stay for the whole duration of this assault. They added barricades, watchtowers, and even pitfalls around the area for extra defense. Of course, Michael added his own touch of protection by adding a headquarters in the middle, where shadow orcs would report on all the things that would happen in the forest. Basically, it was the brain of the whole operation, and allowed Michael to see everything in real time, just like how modern wars were fought using surveillance cameras and drones. The Rebornians greeted him with a curt but polite nod as he walked through the concrete fort. Everyone was serious and busy for the upcoming fight. Michael felt as if he had stepped onto a real battlefield. "Oh, they're so serious," said Vivy as she buzzed around Michael's face while looking around the fort. Since she was still being punished for her shenanigans, Michael forced her to accompany him wherever he went without consuming any emotions from anyone. "Yep, of course they're serious," Michael replied. "We're all taking this very seriously." But as he got closer to the headquarters, that serious tone was quickly dissipated as soon as he heard raucous laughter within the building. Chapter 353. Prep or play? As Michael and Vivy walked inside the building, they heard the sound of something that did not belong in a war. Laughter. I smell joy. So yummy," Vivy muttered, sniffing the air inside the building. She could feel an intense emotion coming from the people inside, and immediately, she wanted to go over there and consume their emotions. "Wait," Michael said as he held her by the wings. "No consuming emotions," he warned her. Vivy disappointedly flew back to Michael's shoulder and pouted. Michael then walked inside and saw that the whole place was surrounded by the shadows of Reborn. Orcanine and Orcupine orcs roamed around the room as they all consulted their own shadows for information. When he designed this room, he thought of all those action movies he had seen in his previous life. He modeled this room to be like those super-secret top rooms, with multiple screens that showed surveillance footage and a radar pinging every second. He hadn't invented televisions yet, so he had to use the shadow skills to create a pseudo-CCTV screen on the four walls. There were also shadow orcs in their desks watching over these screens and relaying information in real time to other orcs. At the very center of the room was the 3D topographical map that he and Griev used the other night. The two orc chieftains, Naruto and Sasuke, were currently looking over this map, discussing their plans. "This looks good," he complimented them. They did a great job in executing his designs. However, they didn't seem to hear him at all. They were too busy in their screaming arguments at each other. "Bu-tu-tu. I think that we should attack the bandits first," Naruto said, slapping his chest to assert dominance. "That is foolish. Ratete. We should let them come to our fort so that we can use our defenses to whittle down their numbers." The two chieftains were once again in a battle of wits to find the best course of actions. Of course, the Orcanine chieftain would suggest an all-out attack that their group was best known for. Conversely, the Orcupine chieftain would rather stay passive and defend the fort, which their group was most adept at doing. This was one of the reasons why the two orc tribes didn't get along in the first place. Oh, a rivalry. Hate and love, friendship and hostility. Those emotions are very rare, Vivy said, flying over the two orc chieftains. Upon hearing this, Naruto and Sasuke both turned to Vivy. Love? Preposterous. There is no friendship between us. It was only now that they noticed Michael and bowed respectfully at him. But even doing so, they couldn't help but fight against each other. Naruto tried to muscle out Sasuke, and Sasuke tried to jab Naruto with his quills. Boss, great to see you here. But who is she? Naruto asked. Her name's Vivy. She's one of the fairies. Great to meet you, Vivy, but you are completely wrong. There is no love lost between us two. That, I agree with you. Vivy shrugged her shoulders. It's clear as day to any fairy that can sense emotion. You two secretly want to be buddies. What? No way. The two orc chieftains once again got into their eternal argument. At this point, even the other Orcupine and Orcanine shadow orcs were tired of this routine. Ever since they had become Rebornians, they had all let go of the hate they had for each other. It was only the chieftains who remained divided between each other. Vivy's words were like pouring gasoline on fire. The mischievous fairy couldn't hold out her laugh and chuckled as she turned around, proud at what she had done, only to see Michael looking at her with squinted eyes. Hee old habits die hard, she said, scratching her head. Don't worry, I didn't eat their emotions. Michael had to give her props. She was very good at manipulating people to show their emotions. Never mind that. Where's the Dragonborns? Where's Fudge? Why do I hear laughter in this building? He finally asked the chieftains. If they stayed here any longer, Vivy could influence the two in actually fighting each other. They're all in the next room over there, one of the Orcupine shadow orcs said. They told us not to disturb them as they are currently busy preparing for the upcoming battle. Michael looked over to the room. He heard nothing but muffled laughter. Ooh-ha! Sure they are, he said sarcastically. He walked over to the room and immediately pushed the door open, revealing the Dragonborns. Hey, I told you not to disturb. Oh, Master, you're here. Bro Mike, what's up? They forced me to play. While every Rebornian was busy sharpening swords, digging trenches, these guys were all busy playing Uno. Master, come play. Of course, Fudge would be here. He was always the mastermind in getting everybody to slack off. Beside him was Zion, who seemed to be losing since he had almost a whole stack of Uno cards in his hands. And surprisingly, even the shy Umisu was caught up in the two mischievous kids. She was the one winning, with only 2 cards left in her hand. Michael, nice of you to join us. If I beat you, will you finally get me ice cream? Even Yuna was playing. Even though he told her not to come since it was dangerous, she still came anyway. Why are you here? He asked her. Don't worry, she shrugged his concerns. Agnes is here too. And besides, I can protect myself just fine. Don't forget, I'm stronger than you, at least, physically anyway. Michael wanted to retort, but she was right. She could have been a heavenly knight after all. Foo-foo. Overprotective already, my son? Michael looked over to the woman sitting next to Yuna and was stunned to see his mother here of all places. Mom! Why are you here? She was even playing Uno with Fudge and the others. I'm here to introduce myself to your friends. You haven't even let me meet them before. And you haven't visited us in years. Oh, the horror. If I didn't have Michael too with me, I would simply cease to exist. Michael felt his cheeks flush as she showed everyone the wooden statue of him. He didn't even want to think about where she stored that. Oh, how cute, Yuna said. Master, he looks just like you, Fudge mentioned. I want to have one too, Omisu shyly said. Hee boss, you do look cute, Jaka said, teasing him. Shut up. Jaku laid on the side, looking like he had just woken up from his sleep even though he had a few Uno cards in his hands. Michael didn't know what was happening. He was too stunned, seeing his mother appear in this place when he hadn't seen her in a while. How did you even get here, Mom? Oh, you know, Lilia said, waving her hands. I just used one of your reborn taxis to Angora City. There, I met with the wonderful Yuna who told me about what you're doing here. And so I went with her. What about Dad? He's back at Angora City. He's fine. He's not suited to be here anyway. Michael wanted to retort that she didn't belong here too. But then he remembered. She did. There was a reason why her title used to be called the Earthen Witch of the West. Chapter 354. Playing Uno with Friends. Michael didn't know why, but the preparation for the battle against the bastard bandits became a normal game night for the Rebornian high rankings. Mom, are you sure you want to be here? We'll be fighting against bandits, you know? Oh, pish posh. I've been dealing with bandits all my life. I was an adventurer before I met your dad. Michael consoled himself on the fact that a 7-star mage like her would be a pretty strong ally to have in the fight to come. But to be honest, he didn't want her anywhere near the battlefield. Come on, honey. Let's play some Uno. Just then, the door opened and Shina came inside. She stopped dead in her tracks as soon as she saw everyone playing Uno instead of preparing like she had told them. Zion, I thought I told you to put those cards away. But sis, it's so boring here without any games to play. Shina quickly changed her Azura expression into one of calmness as soon as she turned to Michael. I'm sorry, Lord Michael. I've been telling these no-good siblings of mine to sharpen their mithril artifacts. But unfortunately, he could see the bubbling rage seething from her teeth. It's fine, he said to her. Maybe it's good to relax once in a while so that we're all ready for a fight tomorrow. There was no use worrying about something that hadn't happened yet. So, playing some cards would be a good way to pass the time while also keeping everyone on their toes. That's right, dear Shina. Come here and sit next to me, Lilia said, patting the ground beside her. The white-scaled dragonborn smiled meekly before going over to Lilia's side to sit down. This was a huge honor for her. Tsh, I thought you wanted us to prepare for the battle, not play some cards, Jaku teased, poking at her hypocrisy, to which Shina just ignored. Okay, let's play some Uno, Fudge shouted, using his shadows to grab all the scattered cards on the floor and consume it inside his slimy body. Everyone saw the cards getting shuffled and neatly stacked inside his semi-transparent violet jelly before it floated back out of Fudge's stomach. Come on, give me a +4, Zion shouted excitedly, rubbing his palms together. I'll distribute the cards so that there's no cheating going around, Shina said, grabbing the stack of cards before Zion could get to it. After another shuffle, Shina distributed the cards evenly amongst the players. You playing? She asked Jaku, who was still laying on the floor off to the side. Yeah, deal me in. All of them were seated in a circle. In a clockwise position, the players were as follows. Zion at the top, next to him was Shina, then Lilia, Umisu, Yuna, then Michael, Jaku, Fudge, and then back to Zion. All in all, there were 9 players for this game of Uno. Soon enough, everyone had 7 cards in their hands, each having different colors and numbers, with a few special cards like the skip, the reverse, the +2, the +4, and the wild color. The goal of the game was to be the person who played all their cards into the pile. Of course, players could only play 1 card per turn, and the cards must correspond to the correct color or the same number of the previous card for it to be played. Ha, these are some good cards, Zion proclaimed. Ho, me too, Fudge ominously said. To start the game, Shina picked a card from the deck and started the pile. It was a blue 6, which meant that players could only play blue cards or cards with the number 6. The game started clockwise, so Fudge started first, putting a blue 0. Then Shina, who put a blue 3. Now it was Lilia's turn. Michael, honey, do you have a yellow card? Michael slapped his head, embarrassed. Mom, the game doesn't work that way. It's a competition. Well, forgive me if I just wanted to make sure my son had the cards to play the game, she said, putting in a yellow 3, changing the color requirement for the entire pile. Umisu played, then Yuna, Michael, and then on to Jaku, who played the first action card, a yellow +2. Fudge would have to pick up 2 cards from the deck because of this action card. However, Fudge put down his own red +2 card, allowing him to pass on the burden to the next player. Now Zion was in trouble. He would have to pick up 4 cards from the deck. However, it turned out that he had his own +2 card. I have one too, he said before playing a green +2 card. Ugh, Shina grunted. She didn't have a +2 card to continue the stack, so she would have to pick up a combined 6 cards from the deck, doubling her current stack. Zion chuckled to himself and stuck his tongue out to his older sister. Bleh bleh. That's why you should have played more with us, sis. You lack Uno training. She glared at him, with her eyes almost glowing red. Michael could have even sworn she was ready to pull out of her bow and arrow. Shut up. But Zion couldn't seem to let it go. What? We're just having fun, he said, putting his hands behind his back. The problem is that while you were here, having fun, I was busy dealing with all the jobs that you had to do. That would have been fine, but you don't even practice with Miss Agnes anymore. Yuna didn't want to interject in their conversation, but Shina was right. Her battle maid was getting quite disappointed with Zion's frequent skipping of early morning training. Tisk! Zion clicked his tongue. I don't want to train all the time. I don't need to. I just need to punch some people and everything is solved. That's exactly your problem, Shina called out. You're overconfident in your abilities, so you don't train to become better. You could be so much stronger than all of us. As a SSS class talent, Zion truly was the most talented one amongst his dragonborn siblings. Because of that, everything came easy for him. Training, cultivation, skills, and spells. But Zion didn't want to change. He just wanted to play. That's boring. That's your responsibility. The two siblings argued once again, halting the game in its tracks. Michael wanted to say something, however, he saw his mother scooting over to Yuna and whispering something to her with a smile. So what do you think? Isn't my son so capable? She said. I think so, Yuna replied. He has certainly done a great job with the Reborn Company. Of course. He inherited his magic talent from me and his business acumen from his father. He could even be considered the best of all the Vanderbilts. And you, Yuna, aren't you also considered the best of all the Montgomery children? Yuna awkwardly laughed. I guess so, haha. Then, wouldn't it be great, even if you and Michael... Stop. What? I'm just having a conversation with Yuna. Conversation? More like you're advertising. Somehow, he was also caught up in an argument with his mother. The game was no longer a game. It was just a big argument from both sides. Chapter 355. Playing Uno with Brutuses. While the whole group was caught up in an argument, there was one spectator among them who relished all the big emotions flowing through the room. Vivy had blended into the room, disguising herself with the bright light on the ceiling. Nobody knew she was even there. Michael would have called out to her, but thankfully, he was caught off guard by the presence of his mother that he completely forgot about his existence. This allowed her to do what she did best. Just observe the situation from a third perspective and see how people's emotions unfold in real time. Ooh, that white-scaled lizard is angry. Her emotions are like that of a mother angry at her son. Even though they are just siblings. She observed Zion and Shina's argument and enjoyed what she was seeing. Being a third-person perspective like this allowed her to see the emotions displayed by each party, giving her an omniscient view, a peek behind the curtain, with all their subtle change in expressions. Even though this was the first time she met them, it felt like she knew them very intimately. It was like an X-ray. She saw all the emotions flow out of their bodies, letting her discern the real truth of their argument. For example, although Zion acted all bratty and mad at his sister, it all stemmed from the fact that he wanted to spend more time with her. That was why he always invited her to play board games and stuff. Of course, his timing wasn't really the best at times, like wanting to play games even today of all times, so Shina would get mad and think that he was just slacking off. Shina wasn't really mad at Zion either. She just wanted him to act more mature and be the dragonborn she knew he could be. She thought he was the best of all of them. +4. Ha 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 ha, you can make a fan out of your cards, sis? Zion teased. It was then that Shina put down the reverse card, allowing the flow of the game to turn counterclockwise. Now, she had the chance to get her revenge. You'll see, she muttered, with a bit of a smile sneaking in her mouth. Vivy wanted nothing more than to consume their emotions and live vicariously through them. Unfortunately, that would alert them of her presence. Michael would definitely force her to stop snooping. Speaking of whom, Michael was exhibiting some interesting emotions as well. His cheeks were bright red from embarrassment, and his ears were practically steaming as Lilia continued to tease him with Yuna. You should come visit our home soon, Yuna. You'll definitely love it there. Maybe you'll even want to move there permanently. Hi. Lilia continued to pester Yuna with not-so-subtle signs of trying to matchmake her with her son. Michael wanted to bury his head in the ground. Imagine Lilia going to a globally famous artist's concert and suddenly screaming out onto the stage trying to get her to meet and date her son, who was sitting right next to her in the concert. That was what Michael was feeling right now. Mom, please, I'm begging you. Stop. But it seemed that his flustered expression spurred his mother more. Look at him getting all embarrassed. Isn't he so cute, Yuna? Yuna covered her mouth as she tried not to laugh. She had always seen Michael as this talented, sparkly, clean leader of Reborn with absolutely no flaws. But now, she was seeing a completely different side of him, one that was getting as red as a tomato. She did admit it made him seem pretty cute. You should be here often, Miss Lilia, Yuna said, peeking a teasing look at Michael. That's a great idea, Yuna. I'll take you up on your offer. Michael looked at Yuna, a look of complete betrayal on his face. He mouthed the words, "Why?" Yuna just responded with a very adorable chuckle. She mouthed her reply back to him. Revenge for the ice cream. He had to shut up with that. Her complaint was totally valid. He had always put off her request of creating ice cream because he was so busy. Come on, let's just play, he said, hoping that the teasing would stop. Unfortunately, his own allies betrayed him. It would be nice to have you here often, said Jaku. It's the only time we can have a chance of beating the boss at a game.
Es-tu, brute?
Michael thought to himself, glaring at Jaku for the betrayal. I can help clear Lord Michael's schedule for a weekly board game night. Miss Lilia, Shina said, already scribbling something out on her notebook. Hey, I didn't approve of that. I'm busy with a lot of projects, he said to her, but she didn't seem to hear it at all. Yeah, it's nice to have you here, Omisu muttered under her breath, getting drowned out by the other's words. Master Mom, I'll definitely teleport you here whenever you like, said Fudge. He expected Fudge to do it, but he didn't expect even the Dragonborns to double-cross him. It was as if his mother had taken control of them. Guys, let's stop talking about me. How about Jaku? Let's make fun of how lazy he is. How about Zion? Aren't the two of you arguing, Shina? Everyone stayed silent for a few seconds, looking at each other. So, Miss Lilia, would you be free on the weekends? Shina asked. Yeehee. More board game nights. Zion celebrated. You can't go if you don't do your training, Jaku retorted. How about you, bro? You don't do it either. I train by not moving. We're different. Of course I would be free on the weekends, Lilia replied to Shina. Yuna, you're free too, right? Of course, Lilia. Everyone ignored Michael's plea and kept talking over him. They weren't even playing the game anymore at this point, which was quite weird since they were making plans of playing more board games in the future. He didn't understand it. Meanwhile, Vivy, who had been observing everything from the background, couldn't help but look at this whole group with a solemn look on her face. They were all arguing and speaking over each other. Yet, there was an indescribable sense of warmth that spread all around them. Right now, at this moment, everyone has the same emotion. And for the first time, Vivy didn't know what kind of emotion this was. She didn't even know this was possible. It was like humans discovering a new color for the first time. As these emotions spread around everyone, Vivy herself felt something missing from her own heart. It was aching, as if there was a hole inside of it. Somehow, watching Michael and the others play Uno made her feel injured. What's happening? Vivy thought to herself. Spurred on by curiosity, Vivy tasted the overflowing emotions in the room. But even after consuming their emotions, it wasn't enough to understand the true feeling they were going through right now. She felt even more empty. She couldn't understand it. Usually, She would feel what others felt after consuming their emotions, making her feel full and satiated. But after tasting their emotion, Vivy felt even hungrier. And no consumption of emotion would make her feel satisfied. While she was in deep thought, Michael flashed a smile. Hee, I almost forgot, he said, reaching out to the air and grabbing Vivy by her wings. You have to play with us too. You won't get away that easily, he said, hoping to divert some of the attention away from him. Chapter 356. Team Game. Michael dear? Who is she? Holding Vivy in his hands, Michael introduced the troublesome fairy to everyone. She's Vivy, one of the fairies that were originally from this forest. Now, the usually strong and unabashed fairy turned meek as soon as everybody was looking at her. It was as if she was a completely different person, one that Michael didn't recognize. Have you played Uno before? Shina asked. The shy fairy shook her head no. It's fairly easy. These are the rules. Shina gave Vivy an abridged version of the rules, just enough for her to play with them without a problem. One of the rules is that you have to give up your +4 to me whenever you have it, said Jaku, holding in his chuckle. Don't believe this lazy bum, Shina said. Sit beside me. I can guide you through it. Vivy floated down next to Shina and Lilia, who welcomed the newcomer with warm smiles. Let's start over then, Fudge said as he used his shadows to take back everyone's cards. Hey, I was winning, Zion complained. You only wanted to do that because you were losing. I just wanted to include CCBB? You don't even know her name. And so, with 10 players all in a circle, the game continued. The usual arguments and banter would occasionally stop the game. Zion would go on and tease Shina, which would earn him her ire. Lilia continued to pester Yuna with weird and cute facts about Michael during his childhood as a way to endear him to her. Jaku slept while it wasn't his turn. Fudge played the worst, with him not knowing the rules half of the time, and having his cards completely turned over and letting others see through his deck. Amisu emerged as the quiet front-runner, but she failed to win because her turn would be skipped too often and she would be too shy to speak up. Vivy remained quiet, just observing everyone and everything around her. Meanwhile, something weird happened. Even though she wasn't consuming their emotions, she felt as if she was feeling something warm in her heart. Vivy, isn't my son so amazing? He must have charmed you all with his looks and talents. That's why even fairies like you followed him, right? Having Lilia brag to her about his son made Vivy feel something. Vivy, tell my sister that she's being a meanie. She doesn't want to admit defeat and let me skip my training, Zion said, trying to plead to Vivy. Having Shina and Zion try to settle their arguments through her made Vivy feel like she belonged. It was at that moment that Vivy looked down at her chest and touched her heart. Is this what emotions feel like? She asked herself. As Vivy was having this realization, the door to their room slammed wide open as the 2 orc chieftains, Naruto and Sasuke, came inside and kneeled to them all. Bu-Tutu, I apologize for this intrusion, but we must inform you that our mid-shadow orcs have detected movement from the bastard bandits. Ra-ta-ta. The first wave has been deployed and they are all headed towards our fort. They are targeting the Golden Road in the hopes of destroying all our progress. Michael stood up, knowing that the fight was about to begin. Will you be able to take care of it? He asked them. Yes, boss, Naruto said. Our mid-shadows are perfectly capable of disposing of these bandits. But boss, I must warn you that they will soon find out about our preparations here, Sasuke said. Right now, the bandits still thought that the Golden Road was protected by a bunch of construction workers with no way to protect themselves. But after this first wave, Blazelle would soon be aware that the entire force of Reborn was here to protect their progress at all costs. It's fine. We expected this anyways, he said to them. The 2 orc chieftains bowed before turning to leave. Shina gracefully stood up and tidied her outfit. The game's over, she said. Zion, you must get ready for the fight. The youngest Dragonborn protested immediately. But we have plenty of time for another game.
No seas stressed.
There's no time to play around. Our Rebornian brothers are fighting the good fight. We can't just stay here and play games all day. But, no buts, Shina said. Zion looked down, pursing his lips. It looked like he was about to accept Shina's order. But suddenly an idea formed in his head. Wait a minute. How about this? What if we had a competition? Shina frowned and crossed her arms. She wasn't going to entertain another one of his shenanigans. Hear me out. We'll see who can bring the most bandits out of the two of us. If you win, then I'll do as you say and be completely obedient to what you say for 1 month. I'll go to training and I'll stop playing around. If you lose, then you won't bug me about any training whatsoever for a month. And you'll let me play games whenever I want, even late at night. Deal? An eyebrow raised in Shina's head. A month, you say? Zion smiled, taking his hand out for his sister to take. He could see her start to raise her hand, about to take the deal. A word of advice, don't take it, Lilia said suddenly. Oh, you don't know the regret I felt when I made a similar deal with Michael. He says it'll only be a while, and 2 years later, and he's still out there going off on his own adventures. After hearing Lilia's somber recollection, Shina had a sudden change of mind and quickly took back her hand. No deal, she said. Zion despaired. He almost had it, but then he suddenly felt a warm hand on his shoulder. He looked up and saw that it was Michael. Wait a minute, Michael said. What if we make this into a better deal? Something that will involve all of us? Everyone turned to him. Boys versus girls, he said. The team that defeats the most bandits will win the game. The loser will have to do whatever the winner dictates for an entire month. His words seemed to have sent a spark of fire within everyone else. Anything I want, my son will do? Lilia said, a smile forming on her face. More board game nights. No curfew. Zion muttered. No tasks. Sleeping for a whole month. Jaku dreamed. Ice cream? Finally. Yuna chuckled. Will everyone finally listen to me? Omisu muttered. One by one, they all nodded their heads, agreeing to Michael's proposition. It was now a team game, 5 versus 5. Yuna, Shina, Umisu, Lilia, and Vivy versus Michael, Jaku, Zion, Fudge, and Griev. The game had transformed into a hunt for the most bandits subdued. Both teams were motivated by their own desires to win. Huddle up, Michael shouted to the guys, gathering them all in a tight circle. We have to win this. It'll be embarrassing if we don't. Michael was motivated by the fact that he wanted his mother back to the nation of Reborn. This was the only way he could do it, or else she would have to stay here and embarrass him all of the time. YOSH. Let's do it, bro Mike. Yawn. Yeah, but maybe a nap first? The boys' team screamed out with vigor. The only odd one out was Griev, who was forcefully recruited to even out the numbers. Ho ho ho. I must have forgotten that I agreed to this, but huzzah! Chapter 357. Orcs Competition. While the boys and the girls' team were huddling up and preparing for their internal competition, Naruto and Sasuke both commanded their orcs to set out and defeat the first wave of bandits coming over towards them. Bu-tu-tu, Naruto shouted, slamming his palms onto his furry thighs as he greeted his men. These were all Orcanine orcs occupying different ranks within the Reborn Shadow organization. There were about 5 high shadow orcs, 13 mid-shadows, and 20 low shadow orcs in their midst, all loyal to Naruto. These were his trusted men, those that had followed him when he was just an orc chieftain in the tribe. BUTO2, they saluted back to him. Our boss has just given us the honor of being the first ones to strike fear into the hearts of our enemies. Naruto's men smiled, each one tapping their chests lightly in anticipation. He slowly turned his head and snuck a peek at his rival Sasuke, who was busy looking over at the map. You must all strike first and earn this honor. Do not let Sasuke's men earn this victory. Sabotage them if you have to. Go forth and prove to Reborn that we Orcanines are the superior orc species within the shadows. BUTO2! They screamed before they all turned into shadows and dispersed into the forestry around them. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the fort, Sasuke slowly turned his back away from Naruto. All around the trees around him, There were Orcupine orcs lying in wait for his instructions. There were those hanging upside down from the trees, those that were laying down on the ground with mud on their faces, and there were even those that were hiding in plain sight.
Rahtata.
Sasuke shouted, strumming the spikes all over his body to create a high-pitched sound. As his Orcupine orcs heard this sound, they responded by shaking their bodies and creating a ringing sound from the collision of their quills amongst each other. Men, this is our chance to prove our strength to Reborn. Defend against those bandits with your very own lives. Do not let them get near the Golden Road. But most importantly, do not let them get captured by those Orcanines. Confuse them if you have to. Just make sure that this honor does not go to Naruto. Unbeknownst to each other, both orc chieftains were having their own plans and ideas outside of their normal scope. It was a competition between the Orcupines and the Orcanines to see which ones were superior. Meanwhile, in the very depths of the forest, a bush ruffled as a bandit emerged from the forest ground. His face was painted with mud. His brown outfit with leaves entangled around him blended perfectly into the environment. He looked around, and after ascertaining no other people in sight, stomped the ground lightly to signal the others. Soon after, 2 more bandits emerged from beside him, seemingly out of nowhere. The hole where they came from slowly closed back up, revealing no sign that there ever was an opening at all. This was the bandits' underground cave system, which they used to navigate through the forest under everyone's noses. This stealthy way of traversing the forest came from none other than the Fairies, who blessed the bandits to help them scare more people. One of the bandits signaled with his hand to move forward, and soon all of them did. 10 bandits emerged and walked stealthily around the bushes and the trees. Eventually, they saw a man-made fortress in the distance. The bandits' eyes widened, clearly not expecting such a large and wide construct from Reborn. There wasn't just a road, but a walled fortress as well. They all looked at their leader, clueless as to what to do next. Their mission this time was to sabotage the Golden Road by demolishing any road that they had built in the forest. They were even tasked to dilute and change the mixture of the strange liquid mixture they called concrete, to destroy any chance they had of an easy construction. "What should we do?" asked one of the bandits. "We should continue our mission. Look, there's no one here to defend against us." They noticed that despite the tall walls and barricades around this fort, there was actually no one there to defend it. It was like a ghost town. "Biututu. What's that sound?" asked one of the bandits. But judging from the confused looks everyone gave him, it seemed that he was the only one who heard it. "Biututu, biututu. There it is again. It's getting louder. I think we should go. I don't have a good feeling about this." The fact that many bandits disappeared after trying to ambush the Reborn Company added to the bandits' anxiety. But the other bandits disregarded his warnings. Their leader even scoffed at the man's cowardice. "Those rumors aren't true. Those bandits probably ran away because they're too afraid of Corp and Blazelle. Trust me, the Reborn Company can't do anything to you. They're just a merchant group with absolutely no fighting power." The man was confident about his words. But just then, one of the bandits in front of him suddenly stopped in his tracks. "Hey, are you okay?" The bandit's eyes were unfocused and darting around the place as if he was sleeping and dreaming. A few seconds later, the man's eyes focused. Then, he began to shout and frantically crawl away in fear. "Aha! Get away from me!" the bandit screamed before eventually collapsing on the ground. Everyone tried to help him and felt the cold sweat in his body. "What the hell is happening?" the bandit leader asked. Unbeknownst to any of them, another shadow attached itself to 3 more bandits. It didn't take long before they screamed in fear too, before collapsing into unconsciousness just like the first guy did. "Biututu." Finally, the bandit leader heard that ominous sound. It was so clear in his mind that it felt like there was a drum inside his head. "What the?" All of a sudden, a giant Orcanine orc showed himself to the bandit. "Who are you?" The orc turned into a shadow, enveloping the man's whole world into nothing but darkness. Then, his voice turned ethereal as he addressed the bandit. "We are the Orcanine orcs, and we are your worst nightmare." The bandit leader frowned and took out the knife from his waist, wielding it with the intention of fighting against his captor. Don't you know us? We're the bastard bandits, and we are now part of Corp. Don't mess with us if you don't want to mess with them, he said threateningly. Unfortunately for him, that was the worst response he could have said. A knife suddenly plunged into his heart, making him feel the pain of death for the first time. Gah! But a moment later, the bandit found himself uninjured, with no knife in his heart. Again, the orc's voice echoed in the darkness. We are the Orcanine orcs. We are your worst nightmare. The bandit frowned again, taking out his knife a second time. And we are the bastard. His words were cut off as he felt his head tumbling down to the ground. He was decapitated. The bandit was forced to experience this hellish loop until the name Orcanine orcs was carved deep into his heart. RRGH, he screamed, finally finding himself back in reality after experiencing thousands of deaths. But unlike the others, he was able to withstand the mental torture and kept himself conscious at the end of it. He crawled back, hoping to find safety. Just then, he saw a shadow latch onto his arms before his entire world was once again enveloped in darkness. Then, an ethereal voice called out to him. We are the Orcupine orcs, and we are. Chapter 358. Experiment set up. Back at the bastard bandit cave, Blazelle was rudely awakened by a bandit with frantic news. What is it? She asked, with her fire almost setting ablaze the bed she was sleeping in. Miss Blazelle, our scouts have yet to return. They were supposed to return yesterday, but it has already been 2 days and there has been no peep of them yet. I'm afraid that they've already been captured by Reborn. Blazelle got up from bed and faced the bandit, who shivered in fear as soon as she got close to him. How could that even be possible? Are you sure they're not late? The bandit gulped. Of course he was sure, but not sure enough to risk the ire of Blazelle. Just then, Wayno walked inside the room and grabbed the bandit's shoulder. It's more than likely that they have already set up a defense system around their golden road. Blazelle stared at the one-armed man. How is that possible? They couldn't have been much faster than us. They come all the way from Angora City while we used your underground tunnels. Wayno pursed his lips. All this time, Blazelle had been underestimating the strength of the Reborn Company, not knowing that they were a force to be reckoned with. Just from the rumors, the bits and pieces he heard about them, Wayno wouldn't have started a war against them in the first place. Unfortunately, he didn't control the bastard bandits anymore. She did. They've been one step ahead of us this entire time. They must have anticipated your attacks once they progressed the golden road into the forest. And it's more than likely that they will target us next. A look of panic and worry washed over Blazelle's face. But that didn't last long. She soon realized that she had nothing to worry about. It's fine. They will find it hard to progress their golden road. The fairies will pester them to no end. Am I right? She asked, chuckling to herself. However, Wayno didn't answer. He wasn't willing to bet on Reborn's failure at this point. In the meantime, send more troops, Blazelle commanded. Meanwhile, Michael and his team named the boys sat together in their own room inside the headquarters. What are we doing here? Let's punch some bandits, Zion said, tapping his biceps. My junior Zion, don't be so crass. We still need them to be recruited into our nation as prisoners. I want some more loyal Iron Maid mem. Oops, I said nothing. Fudge whistled innocently, retracting the mouth from his slime face. He was very lucky that Michael was preoccupied with something or else he would have been cooked. Naruto Sasuke, he called out to the chieftains. Within a fraction of a second, the 2 orcs appeared simultaneously, each one bidding to be faster than the other. Do we have any news on which bandit group is coming? Naruto kneeled. Bu-Tutu. Thanks to the intel provided by Sleazy, we have discovered that the dogfolk bandits have been dispatched to attack us. Sasuke followed along.
Rahtata.
They are stationed in this part of the forest, so it is likely that they will come from this direction and attack the western point of our fort. Their numbers. Just as the orcs were about to finish their report, the door to their room suddenly burst wide open as 5 angry women stared down at Michael. "You're cheating," Yuna accused, pointing at Michael, squinting. "The contract we signed clearly states that no team should ask help from other people." As a diplomat, Yuna had everybody sign a contract to legalize their game. That way, there were no backsies on the agreement. Of course, Yuna made sure the contract was foolproof. "What? I'm not cheating," he argued. "I'm just asking for help from my friends here." "It is cheating." Yuna stomped over and pushed the 2 orcs away from Michael. "You guys can't help him," she said. "Michael, I'm still proud of you, but I'm disappointed," Lilia said, sulking in the corner and shaking her head. "It's not cheating," Michael asserted. "Lord Michael, you cannot use your authority as the boss to get a tactical advantage against us," Shina said, turning her head away from him. "Yup, I agree," Amisu nodded along. Michael couldn't believe that even they agreed that he was cheating. Lilia then prodded Vivy to come inside the room. "Come on, dear. Shout at Michael for cheating." Vivy looked around, confused. But the other girls in the room nodded at her, giving her assurance. "You're a sore loser?" Vivy said, doubting her own words. The other girls gave her a thumbs up. A smile grew on Vivy's face as she gave herself a thumbs up. "We'll be confiscating the orcs. Since you got help from them this time, this means we can use them too," Yuna said, assertively pointing at the door and walking out. The 2 orc chieftains were unsure of what to do, but with just one look from Lilia, their survival instincts kicked in and they followed them out of the room. Michael sighed. Technically, he was cheating, but he didn't think they would notice. Thankfully, though, he got the information he needed from the orcs. They were about to face dogfolk bandits. "What happened to our traps? Is it all set up?" Michael asked Griev as they both looked at the topographical map of the forest. Griev nodded, with his ribs clicking as he did so. "Yes, Michael. All is well. We just need to add the constructs to the layout and it will be done." Michael had instructed Griev to prepare the landscape for their experiment. Aside from wanting to win this competition against the girls, Michael also wanted to use this time to test out the roller coaster features he was going to build in the future. Speaking of which, he wanted to see if the prototype was already constructed by Kong and the engineers. So, he briefly transported himself back to Angora City, specifically the warehouse just by the side of their department store. This was where Kong and the other senior-level engineers were working on the roller coaster prototype. Michael looked around and saw the makings of a roller coaster trailway, which was halfway constructed from the bottom as it climbed up to the apex of the ride. He saw a group of Rebornian engineers gathered in a circle as they looked at blueprints and small metal prototypes in their hands. Kong noticed his arrival and immediately greeted him. "Boss, we just finished the cart prototype. As of now, it has been fitted to carry dogfolk, catfolk, lizardfolk, and other such demi-humans with human body types." In the middle of their table, he saw a large cart modified to seat 2 people in the front, and another 2 at the back. It looked like a crude version of the roller coaster carts he saw in his previous life. But this one looked bulkier and thicker than the original one. "It's made from Damascus steel," Michael observed. "Yes, boss. This is the only metal that is lightweight but still strong enough to withstand great accelerations." Michael knocked on the metal and nodded in satisfaction. "This will do," he said. "Now how about the features? Have you finished it yet?" "Yes, boss. For dogfolk and other demi-humans with the canine bloodline, we have borrowed from your great wisdom and created this masterpiece." Chapter 359. Dogfolk testers secured. Kong and the other engineers removed the veil of their product, showing a large pillar with a donut-like shape at the top of it. Michael had seen this before. "It's a Tesla coil," he thought to himself. "With this object, we can summon lightning and electricity without the use of mana." Kong pushed the lever and the coil rumbled as it started its power. Soon enough, the first electrical discharge arced through the air, almost reaching up to the ceiling. It wasn't long before arcs of electricity spewed out of the coils, demonstrating its terrifying electrical powers. "What do you think, sir? It's good, right?" Michael smiled. It's perfect, he said. I'll be counting on all of you to set up the experiment in the forest. Very well, boss. We're ready, Kong said, with the rest of the engineers nodding their heads. With a simple snap of a finger, the shadow underneath Michael's feet began to widen and envelop the engineers. A darkness enveloped their surroundings, lasting for just a second, before receding back into Michael's shadow. The Rebornian engineers stumbled forward, almost falling, as they landed on the uneven ground of the forest soil. This is where our test subjects will be arriving. I want you to build a simple rail track starting from here all the way up to that cliff over there. Michael gave them all instructions on where to build the experimental track. He also led the construction workers from the Golden Road and had them do all the heavy lifting for the engineers so that the construction would be finished before the bandits arrived. Meanwhile, he went back to the fort and convened with his teammates. Bro Mike, can't we go out already? What if the girls already got some bandits by now? Zion said, punching the air to appease his excitement. I want to be lazy, but I agree with Zion. I need that 1 month of sleep, so we need to act now, Jaka said, uncharacteristically standing upright with no bags under his eyes. Ho ho ho, I didn't know we could win a prize. How about, what were we doing this for again? Master, let's get ninja, Fudge said, creating his new catchphrase. That doesn't work, he said to Fudge, which the slime ignored. But I agree with you all. It's time to play. This is what we're going to do. Fudge, you're going to lure them here while Zion. Soon enough, an entire platoon of dogfolk bandits set off from their base camp towards Reborn's fort. They all prided themselves in their extraordinary senses, some of which were natural, and some of which came from their innate skills. This helped them get the advantage against enemies, allowing them to know their precise location even before their enemies knew where they were. Their group consisted of all the different subspecies of canines, the Labrador men, the Beagle men, and even Chihuahua men. However, they were all led by the apex of all dogfolks, the Wolfman. This Wolfman was a close relative of the fierce werewolves, which was why Wolfmen were feared for their physical strength and speed that put them above all dogfolks. This particular Wolfman was called Jacob, and he had a fearsome 6-star cultivation that allowed him to have a high authority within the bastard bandit group. Jacob, I smell them. Humans, one of the bloodhound men reported. Every other dogfolk bandit raised their heads and sniffed the air, all identifying a group of humans in the distance. They could follow the tiniest bit of scent like it had a visible line that led back to the source. Let's pounce, Jacob shouted to the rest of the men. Their entire platoon, consisting of about 20 bandits, ran through the forest on all fours as they followed the unique scent of humans in the air. It wasn't long before they saw the heat signatures of a few humans gathered in a bunch. The lack of intense heat on their bodies indicated their lack of strength. These were just normal humans with no fighting ability whatsoever. And judging from the fact that they were building something with their hands, it was safe to say that they had come across some defenseless Rebornian engineers. Ha! Fresh meat, Jacob said, licking his lips. Go and hunt these humans. We must avenge the disappearance of our brothers. Bark, bark, bark. In a matter of a few seconds, the pack of dogfolks surrounded the group of humans without any difficulty. They didn't even seem to fight back. AWOO, Jacob howled. You're Rebornians, right? The engineers nodded, raising their hands to prove their innocence. First of all, I would like to say that I'm sorry, and thank you for your sacrifice. Jacob tilted his head, unable to understand the humans' words. They should be feeling fear right now, yet there was no increased sweat production in the humans' bodies. Kukuku, do you think that there will be anyone to save you? Jacob scoffed. There's no one here. His shout echoed through the forest. The lack of response proved his point. But instead of cowering under his howl, the human engineers just took out their pens and began writing furiously on their notebooks. Excuse me, but how many are you right now? One of the engineers asked. Do any of you have any allergies? Another asked. Are any of you related to one another? All the dogfolk bandits looked at each other in confusion. They had never experienced this kind of ignorance before. They were beginning to think these humans were stupid. Enough with these inane questions, Jacob shouted. But it's important to find out all the parameters of the experiment, one of the engineers said. Experiment? What the hell are you all talking about? We are here to find out the limits of a dogfolk's fear. The engineers answered simultaneously. The bandits turned silent for a moment, before they all howled in laughter. Ha ha ha! Fear? Us? We have fought against armies. We have no fear. Don't you know who we are? Jacob asked, smiling. Don't you know who I am? The engineers shook their heads, but instead of getting intimidated, they seemed genuinely curious. We are the feared canine division of the bastard bandits. Anyone who tries to run away in the forest to escape from our protection fees is always caught by our team. You think we're going to be intimidated by a bunch of smarty pants like you? The dogfolk laughed amongst each other. Jacob wiped a tear from his eye from too much laughter. Haha. But enough of this. One of you, go and catch them, Jacob commanded. A Rottweiler man walked forward, unclenching his jaws to intimidate the engineers. You're coming with me, he said. One of the engineers raised his hand and signaled him to stop. Stop right there. Don't move any closer. And why not? The dogfolk chuckled. I'll do what I want. You can't stop me. The engineer sighed and consulted his notes. We're not done calibrating the machine, but if you insist, then by all means go ahead. The Rottweiler man stepped forward, with the other dogfolk bandits behind him still laughing and chuckling to themselves. But as he took another step forward, they all suddenly heard a mechanical click. Everybody saw as a cart suddenly sped towards the Rottweiler man at high speeds. Chapter 360. First Roller Coaster Tester. The cart crashed into the dogfolk bandit before the momentum allowed him to fall directly into the seats. "Oh, woo!" The Rottweiler man screamed in pain, but before he could try and get out of this cart, a seatbelt suddenly sprung into action and tied the unsuspecting man into the chair. He tried to rip the seatbelt from the cart, but realized that they were made out of thin, layered Damascus steel wires. The more he pulled on it, the tighter it became. Unable to get out, the dogfolk was helpless as the cart rolled through the grass, revealing the metal railway underneath. "Whoh!" He screamed as the cart picked up speed directly towards the cliff. He was going to collide. He raised his hand, preparing himself for the crash. But at the very last second, the cart swerved sideways, almost tipping the very cart itself. The Rottweiler man opened his eyes and heaved a sigh of relief. He thought he was going to die, but his troubles didn't seem to end there. He looked forward and saw that the metal railways that the cart followed continued slanting upwards as it rose through the cliffside. The momentum of the cart allowed it to scale the cliff upwards, allowing it to reach the very top. The cart slowed down as it reached the plateau. He thought it was over, but then he found that the cart continued to move and swerve to the left, effectively turning around towards the cliff itself. "No, no, 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 no," the dogfolk muttered to himself. Click, 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 click. The cart slowed down at the very end of the cliff, teetering at the edge. Then it finally stopped moving. The dogfolk stopped breathing, cautious that any sudden movement could make the cart plummet down into the ground. Then the wind breezed behind him, giving the cart the finally push as it raced down into the ground at almost a 90-degree angle. "AWWWO!" The dogfolk howled in fear. He couldn't help but grab onto his seatbelt for safety, hoping that it wouldn't throw him out of the cart. And just as the cart was about to hit the ground, it swerved to the right once again, allowing the Rottweiler man to escape the fall. "Ha! Ha!" The dogfolk bandit drooled as he tried to catch his breath. Now that it's over, he realized that he was never in any sort of danger whatsoever. This cart and track had made it seem like he was going to fall, but it had swerved away from a direct collision. Not only that, but he was a warrior in his own right. He realized that he could jump the cliff and land safely on his feet if he wanted to. "What was I afraid of?" the Rottweiler man said to himself. He tried to get out of the seat, but realized that the seatbelt was still firmly attached to the cart. And despite slowing down, the cart had yet to reach a complete stop and still continued to roll forwards. This time, the cart wasn't going towards the cliff, but inside it. There was a small cave opening in the distance, and the dogfolk could see that the tracks led inside it. Humph! I'm no longer scared, he said to himself. The cart continued onwards, entering the dark cave devoid of any light. For the dogfolk bandit, this wasn't scary at all. Bandits like them lived in a cave and spent most of their time in the tunnels. A little bit of cramped darkness wasn't going to hurt him. But then, rumble. Thunder roared through the cave, echoing endlessly in the chamber. Storm! The dogfolk uttered anxiously. He had a bad feeling about this. If there was one thing that all dogfolk were afraid of, then it was BZZZT. Lightning arced through the ceiling, lighting up the cave and showing the horrified expression of the Rottweiler man. A W.O. he screamed, with his utter fear and terror echoing out of the cave and reaching the other dogfolk bandits in the forest. What was that? Jacob roared. Dogfolks like them communicated through the howls, meaning they could feel the horror and panic that the Rottweiler was feeling right now. The hairs on their body stood up. One of the engineers ignored the wolfman's roar and consulted his other engineers. We should add more velocity in the cart. It almost stalled at the very top of the cliff, he said. Agreed, said the other engineers, writing down in their notebooks. Just then, everyone heard the sound of metal clanking as the cart returned back into its starting point, having looped all the way from the cliff back to the forest below. Its inhabitant, the Rottweiler man, had fallen unconscious in the seat, drooling his saliva all over the seatbelt. What did you do to him? Jacob demanded an answer, but once again the engineers ignored him. Now, shall we go on to the next test? Who wants to volunteer? The engineer asked the dogfolks. Another empty cart rolled out from the forest and towards the dogfolk bandits. It was the same as the last one, meaning that anyone who fell into its trap would suffer the same fate as the Rottweiler man. Roar! Jacob growled at the engineers. You will pay for this. Men, attack them, he commanded. Now that they knew it was coming, it was very easy to dodge the incoming cart no matter how fast it was. Just then, the dogfolk bandits picked up a sound from behind them. Punch, punch, punch. I want to punch some people. But before they could reach the engineers, one of the bandits suddenly felt a huge force pushing him from behind. Jacob turned around and saw a red-scaled demi-human with draconic-like features punching one of the bandits from behind. The Chihuahua man was caught unaware and stumbled forwards from the punch, eventually falling down perfectly into the cart. One down. One more seat available, Zion shouted as he faced another bandit. The husky man with black and white fur howled as he unsheathed his knife and lunged at Zion. The red-scaled dragonborn ducked away from the knife, surprising the dogfolk. The husky man used his spell, Zigzag Claw, allowing him to increase the speed of his knife swing towards Zion. But even with the power of a 4-star spell, the dogfolk was unable to even graze Zion's clothes. The dragonborn always ducked and danced around the blade perfectly. Eventually, out of frustration, the husky man overextended his swing, allowing Zion to duck and deliver a devastating liver shot to the body. The dogfolk bandit almost vomited out his insides. But before he could even do anything else, Zion punched the knife away from his hand and sent out a perfect uppercut to his jaw, sending him flying directly towards the cart. Now with 2 passengers, the cart sped up through the tracks and experienced the same fear and terror that the Rottweiler man experienced for the first time. Just then, more and more carts rolled down through the tracks, carrying the combined capacity of about 10 more bandits. And before they knew it, another passenger was unwittingly forced to ride the coaster. Jacob turned around and saw a similar-looking demi-human with dark blue scales as he brought down his sword and defeated a bandit in swordplay. What? Who are these people? Jacob shouted.